Before the pyramids pierced the skies, before the first kings carved their names in stone, there may have been something else, something older, something forgotten. Beneath the oceans, buried under jungles, and hidden deep within mountains, whispers of lost worlds linger, fragments of civilizations that vanished long before recorded history began. We call them pre-flood, but their true names, their stories, their gods, are shadows. Their ruins defy explanation. Their technologies seem misplaced. And their legends? Terrifying. What kind of people thrived before the flood myths echoed across every ancient culture? Who built temples now lost to the sea? Why do so many origin stories speak of a cataclysm, of giants, of punishment from the heavens? This is not a story of Atlantis. This is the story of what might have come before Atlantis. So sit back, relax, and let's dive deep into the most chilling, mind-bending tales of pre-flood civilizations. Not myths, possibly memories, and they are far more terrifying than we've ever dared to imagine. High in the remote mountain ranges of the Middle East, where jagged cliffs pierce the sky and valleys seem carved by forgotten hands, lies a region that has long whispered secrets to those who listen closely. These are lands of ancient stone and wind, where time folds in on itself and myth walks beside history. For millennia, they have drawn the attention of poets, prophets, and scholars alike. But among the oldest and most enigmatic tales passed down from this place is one that continues to baffle: the story of the Watchers. The Book of Enoch, a non-canonical Jewish text written more than 2,000 years ago, offers one of the most haunting and detailed accounts of these beings. It speaks of a group of celestial entities, referred to as the Watchers, who descended to Earth in a time before the Great Flood. Their domain, according to the text, was not just physical, but spiritual, a liminal space between the divine and the earthly. They were sent to observe humanity, to guide from a distance, but they did not keep their distance. Instead, they descended. The story tells of 200 Watchers who came down upon Mount Hermon, a towering peak that straddles the borders of modern-day Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. In the silence of its snow-capped ridges and mist-wrapped slopes, they made a pact, an oath to take human wives, to live among men, and to share with them forbidden knowledge. The Book of Enoch describes this moment as both wondrous and tragic. It was the beginning of a fracture, a break in the order of the cosmos. But why Mount Hermon? And why here? The mountain has been sacred for thousands of years. In the Canaanite tradition, it was known as the abode of gods. Even today, traces of ancient temples cling to its summit, their stones worn smooth by time and wind. These are not grand monuments, but their presence is unsettling. Lonely altars to forgotten powers, still aligned with celestial paths. From certain vantage points, the stars seem to hang lower here, as though the sky itself is watching. Archaeological surveys have uncovered layers of occupation dating back to the Neolithic period. Pottery fragments, burial sites, and crude inscriptions point to a continuous, if quiet, human presence. Yet none of these findings explain the mythic weight the mountain carries. Local legends, both Christian and Islamic, echo the idea of divine encounters in this place. Pilgrims speak of strange lights on the summit, of voices in the wind. Even military personnel stationed nearby have reported inexplicable sightings, glowing orbs, erratic weather, moments of deep unease. Is it just the power of a story seated deep in our collective memory? Or could there be more? The tale of the Watchers, as preserved in Enochian literature and later echoed in Gnostic, Islamic, and esoteric traditions, becomes stranger still when we examine their influence. According to the text, these beings taught humanity the secrets of the heavens and the earth. They revealed metallurgy, weapon-making, enchantments, the signs of the stars. Some traditions credit them with the origin of civilization itself, passing down fragments of divine knowledge that accelerated human development. But there was a cost. The children of the Watchers and their human consorts were said to be giants, Nephilim, beings of immense size and strength, whose presence corrupted the world. Violence spread. Knowledge became dangerous. The earth groaned beneath their weight. And so, according to the myth, the Great Flood was sent as a cleansing, a reset. These are not small ideas. They suggest that long before our earliest empires rose, there may have been a civilization, or something like one, born not just from humans, but from an encounter with the other. Of course, many scholars see the Book of Enoch as symbolic, an allegory of forbidden knowledge, of boundaries crossed and order undone. The Watchers may be metaphors for priest-kings or wise men whose wisdom grew too dangerous. The Nephilim could be echoes of an ancient race now lost to time, or simply mythological stand-ins for the chaos that follows unchecked power. But not everyone agrees. Some fringe researchers, drawing from ancient astronaut theory, suggest that the Watchers were not angels or spirits, but beings from elsewhere, perhaps another world or another dimension. Their descent, they argue, was not metaphorical, but literal. The knowledge they shared, so strangely advanced for its time, may be evidence of contact with a superior intelligence. Mount Hermon, in this view, becomes a kind of ancient landing site, a point of entry between realms. It is no coincidence, they say, that the mountain lies near the 33rd parallel north, a line that has long been associated with mystery, power, and significant historical events. Skeptics dismiss such claims as pseudoscience, pointing out the lack of hard evidence and the dangers of reading modern interpretations into ancient texts. And yet, the story remains. Why does it persist across cultures? Why does the idea of divine beings descending, mingling with humans, and bringing knowledge that transforms the world echo in so many traditions, from the Sumerian Annunaki to the Greek Titans, from the Hindu Devas to the Mesoamerican sky gods? Could they all be tapping into the same forgotten memory? And what of Mount Hermon? What still lies buried beneath its stones or hidden in its caves? The Watcher's domain is not just a tale, it is a mirror, a reflection of our deepest fears and desires, to be guided, to be elevated, but also to be warned that some knowledge comes at a price, that not all ascents lead to enlightenment, and not all descents are benign. We may never know what truly happened on that ancient mountain, whether it was a myth, a metaphor, or a memory. But the winds still whisper there, and the silence still watches. So let us continue. There are more domains to uncover, more echoes to follow. Let's journey deeper into the forgotten world of the pre-flood age. As we leave behind the chilling echoes of the Watcher's domain, our path winds eastward, into the windswept steppes of Central Asia. Here, where the land stretches unbroken to the horizon, where sky and earth seem to merge in endless silence, something stirs beneath the surface of memory, a whisper of a forgotten people, a great power, a name that resurfaces again and again in obscure manuscripts, in forbidden maps, in half-erased chronicles: Tartaria. At first glance, the word seems an invention, an echo of medieval imagination, a realm too vast, too grand, too advanced to fit neatly into our historical frameworks. But dig deeper, and something strange begins to emerge. For centuries, maps printed across Europe and Asia labeled vast swaths of territory as Tartaria, sometimes described as a loose confederation, other times as a mighty empire. Tartaria was thought to stretch from the Ural Mountains to the edges of the Pacific, from Siberia to the deserts of Persia. But who were the Tartarians, and why do they vanish so abruptly from our historical record? One of the earliest mentions of Tartaria appears in Renaissance cartography, often adorned with warnings of unknown peoples and strange creatures. Some maps refer to Great Tartary, a sovereign land of immense reach. Others mark it with cryptic annotations: "Here dwell giants, city of the ancient ones, land of cyclopean ruins." As the age of exploration unfolded, these territories remained largely inaccessible to European scholars. Few dared to journey that far north. Fewer returned. But long before these maps, long before modern history attempted to draw borders and erase anomalies, the ancient people of this region left clues: massive earthen mounds, strange megalithic ruins, and architectural fragments scattered across the steppes. Some of these structures, now weathered by centuries of frost and wind, appear to defy the technological abilities of known nomadic cultures. Stones too heavy to move without modern cranes, intricate geometric alignments with the stars, underground complexes whose original purpose remains unclear. Were these the works of later groups, the Scythians, the Huns, the Mongols? Or do they belong to an older layer of human history, one we've yet to understand? In recent years, fringe theorists have revived the idea of a vast Tartarian civilization, one that may have predated the flood myths found across the world. They point to architectural oddities in far-flung places, colossal structures with unmatched craftsmanship, often attributed to more recent builders, but bearing signatures of advanced design. Ornate vaulted ceilings in Siberian cathedrals, star forts aligned with perfect precision, basements buried under layers of silt, suggesting not decay, but catastrophe. Could it be that Tartaria was not merely a medieval empire, but the remnant of something much older? A civilization that reached heights of knowledge and engineering before the world was washed clean by some global cataclysm. Mainstream historians, of course, urge caution. The name Tartaria, they argue, was often a catch-all used by Western mapmakers to label lands that were little understood. Many of the structures cited by alternative researchers have plausible timelines, rooted in the Tsarist or post-Mongol eras. Flooded basements can be explained by shifting river paths or poor urban planning. The apparent mysteries dissolve, they say, under closer examination, but some questions remain. Why do so many 18th and 19th century maps still refer to Tartaria as an active political entity, even as it fails to appear in contemporary diplomatic records? Why do explorers' journals from those centuries describe strange ruins and cities older than time, yet those accounts are now largely forgotten or dismissed? And then there are the legends, passed quietly through generations in villages tucked away in the Caucasus, the Altai Mountains, the Kazakh Plains. Tales of tall, pale-skinned builders who tamed lightning, who vanished into the ground during a great deluge, of music made from metal and air, of cities swallowed whole in a single night. Some researchers suggest that what we now call Tartaria may be a linguistic descendant of an even older tradition, not an empire in the political sense, but a cultural memory, fragmented across tribes and languages, a recollection of a time when humanity knew more than it remembers, when the steppes were not wilderness, but the center of something vast, luminous, and now utterly lost. It is here, amid the cold winds and shifting sands, that the mystery of the great Tartarian ancestors lingers, not in a single site, but in a pattern of erased names, of misunderstood ruins, of histories that do not quite align. The more one looks, the more it feels as though something vital has been edited from our shared story. Was Tartaria merely a geopolitical label, or does it point toward a forgotten chapter of human civilization, one that stood tall before the seas rose, before the stars lost their meaning, before the flood reset the world. And if it did exist, if the ancestors of Tartaria truly built wonders now buried or mistaken for younger works, what did they know that we do not? What did they see coming? The steppes hold their silence, the ruins do not speak. But somewhere, beneath centuries of dust and denial, the truth waits. Let us continue. The path grows darker, and the echoes of the pre-flood world grow louder with every step. As the echoes of Tartaria fade into the windswept silence of the steppes, our path turns north. Far north, beyond the forests of Siberia, beyond the last traces of ancient maps, into a realm long shrouded in ice and myth. A land few have seen, and even fewer have returned from unchanged. The Arctic. Here, in this realm of perpetual twilight and shifting glaciers, legend speaks of something almost unthinkable, a lost polar civilization. A world once warm, vibrant, and alive, long before the Earth tilted, before the Great Freeze set in. Some call it Arktos. Others know it only as Hyperborea, Ultima Thule, or the land beyond the north wind. Today, the Arctic is a world of extremes, hostile, frozen, forbidding. But was it always this way? Ancient Greek historians like Herodotus and Pindar spoke of a land far to the north where the sun barely set, where a noble people lived in peace for 1,000 years. These Hyperboreans were said to possess wisdom beyond reckoning, to live in harmony with nature, untouched by war or time. Their civilization, according to these early accounts, existed long before the rise of Egypt, before Babylon, perhaps even before the flood itself. At first, such claims seem like little more than poetic invention. But in the last century, glimmers of evidence have emerged that challenge our assumptions about the deep past. Arctic ice cores, stretching back tens of thousands of years, reveal periods of dramatic climate instability, brief windows in which the polar regions were temperate, even lush. Pollen samples extracted from deep beneath the Greenland and Antarctic ice suggest forests once grew, where now only snow survives. Could it be that these myths are distant memories of a real place, now buried beneath centuries of ice? Some geologists point to the Pleistocene epoch, when Earth's axis may have shifted during a cataclysmic event, plunging the once habitable Arctic into sudden winter. Others propose more controversial ideas, that the North Pole was once positioned elsewhere entirely, and that entire continents may have been displaced over geologic time. In this view, the polar civilization wasn't just metaphor, but a real society erased by planetary upheaval. But if Arktos truly existed, where are the ruins? That question continues to haunt explorers and theorists alike. Satellite imagery over certain Arctic regions has revealed puzzling formations beneath the ice, circular structures, geometric alignments, and what some interpret as artificial ridges. While many scientists caution that these could be natural formations, ice ridges, pressure faults, or simple geological coincidences, others aren't so sure. One particularly enigmatic case lies in the Franz Josef Land archipelago, a remote cluster of icy islands in the Russian Arctic. Here, strange megalithic stones have been reported, shaped in ways that seem intentional, even architectural. Russian expeditions during the Soviet era documented these anomalies, but classified much of their findings. Were they merely conducting military surveys, or did they find something that needed to be hidden? Adding to the mystery is the recurring appearance of polar civilizations in esoteric traditions across the world. In Hindu cosmology, the mythical Mount Meru is said to sit at the center of the earth, encircled by the lands of the gods. Some traditions place it near the pole. Norse legends tell of Asgard and the Bifrost Bridge, realms said to lie in the far north, connected to our world by shimmering light. Tibetan texts refer to Shambhala, a sacred realm often associated with the polar axis, a place of supreme knowledge and ancient power, hidden beyond reach. Even Plato, in his recounting of Atlantis, mentions a land opposite the Pillars of Heracles, perhaps not southward, as most assume, but on the other end of the world, cloaked in ice and time. Could all these disparate accounts be fragments of a collective memory? A civilization so ancient, so far removed from ours, that only its shadows remain in myth and symbol? Fringe researchers have long speculated on the possibility of a polar origin for civilization itself. According to this theory, Arktos, or its real-world counterpart, may have been the cradle of knowledge, the source from which ancient cultures inherited geometry, astronomy, metallurgy. As the cataclysm approached, whether flood, ice age, or pole shift, its inhabitants fled south, becoming the founders of new civilizations in Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and Mesoamerica. But where is the proof? Some point to the uncanny similarities among the world's oldest mythologies: sky gods descending from the heavens, knowledge-bearers who arrive by sea, cultures that seem to appear fully formed with calendars, writing, and architecture. Others note the widespread reverence for the North as sacred in traditions, ranging from the Celts to the Egyptians to the Hopi. Skeptics argue that these are coincidences, the result of cultural diffusion, or the psychological need to imagine origins in a distant, unreachable place. They warn that polar civilization theories often lack hard archaeological evidence and risk straying into fantasy. And yet, the questions persist. Why do so many ancient sources describe a warm, inhabited North? Why are so many traditions fixated on a place of purity, knowledge, and light located beyond the Arctic Circle? And what lies beneath the ice, under layers we have not yet pierced, in regions no one is allowed to thoroughly explore? The idea of a civilization flourishing at the top of the world before the flood sounds impossible. And maybe it is. But as our understanding of climate history, geology, and myth continues to evolve, so too does the possibility that something existed there, something we've forgotten, or were never meant to remember. So we follow the cold winds further, deeper, into the silence that blankets the world's oldest ice. What might still be locked away beneath it? A myth? A people? A warning? Let's keep going. The story of the pre-flood world is only just beginning to reveal itself. From the frozen mists of the polar north, our journey now turns southward, toward warmth, water, and echoes of another kind of forgotten greatness. Beneath the restless waves of the Pacific, in a realm once thought empty and remote, lies the whispered memory of a vast and powerful civilization. Its name is not found on modern maps, nor carved on surviving monuments, yet it surfaces again and again in the murmurings of ancient myths, in cryptic inscriptions, and in the dreams of submerged lands. This was the Empire of Pan. To look at the Pacific today is to gaze upon the largest and deepest ocean on Earth, an endless, roiling expanse stretching from Asia to the Americas. But in the distant past, some believe it was home to a thriving, highly advanced civilization, one now lost beneath the waves. The name Pan is most often linked to the term Mu, a legendary sunken continent first proposed in the 19th century by Augustus Le Plongeon, who claimed that Maya inscriptions spoke of a land far to the west, beyond the sea, where civilization began. Mainstream archaeologists have long dismissed the idea of Mu as speculative fiction, an invention of Victorian mysticism. But others have found the pattern too widespread, too deeply embedded in global folklore to ignore. Polynesian oral traditions speak of Hawaii, a mystical homeland from which their ancestors emerged. In Japan, legends tell of Nihon Kai no Kuni, the land beneath the sea. And in parts of Micronesia, stories still echo of gods who once ruled from a now submerged island chain, wiped away by a furious sky and rising waters. Could all of these be fragments of a larger truth? A lost civilization that once ruled the Pacific Basin? The scattered islands of the Pacific, Easter Island, the Marquesas, the Solomons, and others, hold clues that continue to baffle modern researchers. Take Nan Madol, for instance, a vast megalithic complex built atop coral reefs in Micronesia, composed of massive basalt pillars arranged into canals, platforms, and burial chambers. No one knows who built it. Local legends speak of sorcery, of floating stones summoned from distant lands by forgotten rulers. The basalt itself weighs tons, and the quarry lies miles away, with no clear method by which it could have been transported. Was Nan Madol merely an isolated marvel, or a surviving outpost of a larger, now vanished empire? The Empire of Pan, according to fringe theorists, was not merely a regional kingdom. It was a planetary force, a maritime superpower that harnessed the rhythms of tides and stars, spreading knowledge, language, and architecture across the globe long before the floodwaters rose. In this view, Pan was a mother culture, its emissaries reaching the coasts of Mesoamerica, India, and Mesopotamia, planting the seeds of civilization in the fertile crescent of the world. More intriguing still is the appearance of similar pyramid-like structures across Pacific islands, tiered, truncated, often aligned with solar and lunar cycles. These architectural echoes suggest not just diffusion, but a shared origin. Could they be the fingerprints of Pan? Skeptics, of course, argue that such similarities arise naturally, that humans across the world, responding to the same environmental pressures and spiritual impulses, independently arrived at similar solutions. But others ask, why do so many of these sites, thousands of miles apart, speak of a cataclysm, a sudden deluge? Why does the memory of a vanished land, often called by different names, but sharing eerily similar characteristics, persist in isolated cultures across the Pacific Rim? Geological evidence does offer some tantalizing possibilities. During the last glacial maximum, sea levels were over 400 feet lower than today. Entire continental shelves, now submerged, would have been dry land. The Sunda Shelf near Southeast Asia, the Sahul Shelf near Australia, and the submerged Kermadec and Lord Howe Rises could once have hosted human settlements. Could these drowned lands have been part of the Empire of Pan? Some researchers point to the Bimini Road near the Bahamas and underwater terraces off Yonaguni in Japan, both claimed by alternative historians as remnants of ancient cities. While mainstream geologists attribute these formations to natural processes, others note their unnatural symmetry, sharp angles, and staircase-like structures. Natural or not, their presence beneath the ocean invites uncomfortable questions. And then there are the linguistic anomalies, shared root words, mythological archetypes, and cultural motifs that link Polynesia with South America, or Japan with Peru. Thor Heyerdahl famously sailed the Kon-Tiki from Peru to the Polynesian islands to prove that ancient transoceanic contact was at least possible. Might the builders of Pan have done the same, not as wanderers, but as rulers? One particularly haunting legend comes from Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, home to the enigmatic Moai statues. Oral tradition speaks of the Hanau Epe, a long-eared people who arrived from the sea, bringing knowledge and construction methods unknown to the natives. They ruled, built, and eventually vanished after a mysterious conflict. Were they survivors of a greater civilization, seeking refuge on the last exposed fragments of their homeland? No one can say for certain. And yet, as we explore the depths of our oceans, mapping the seafloor with greater precision, we continue to find anomalies, straight lines that stretch for miles, submerged ridges that seem artificial, lost structures hidden beneath sediment. Is the Empire of Pan waiting to be rediscovered? Or was it always a memory? A warning passed down from a time before time? If Pan truly existed, what caused its downfall? Was it the flood spoken of in global mythologies? A sudden tectonic upheaval? Or something more abstract, an inner collapse, a loss of balance between knowledge and wisdom? The Pacific remains silent. Its waves wash endlessly over what may be the bones of a forgotten empire. But somewhere below, beneath coral and current, truth waits in the dark. Let's continue. The world before the flood still has stories to tell, if we're willing to listen. As we leave behind the drowned legacy of Pan and drift further into the silent reaches of Earth's memory, we approach the most remote and desolate frontier on the planet, Antarctica. A continent cloaked in perpetual cold, walled in by towering glaciers and sealed under miles of ice. It is a place seemingly untouched by time, too inhospitable for life, too isolated for history. And yet, beneath its frozen surface, some believe something extraordinary may lie hidden. The remains of a pre-flood city, built by unknown hands. Antarctica stretches over 5 million square miles, larger than Europe and utterly alien in its stillness. Its ice sheets conceal 90% of the planet's freshwater and reach depths of more than 2 miles. No trees grow here. No ancient ruins rise above the ground. But what if the ruins are not above, but below? The idea of an ancient city buried beneath Antarctica seems, at first, implausible. After all, science tells us the continent has been covered in ice for millions of years, but recent findings have begun to complicate that picture. Studies of ice cores and sediment layers reveal that Antarctica was not always frozen. Roughly 12,000 years ago, coinciding with the end of the last ice age, temperatures spiked dramatically during a period known as the Younger Dryas. For a brief window in geological time, the continent may have supported a temperate climate, with rivers, forests, and perhaps even human life. Satellite scans conducted by NASA and independent geophysical teams have identified strange anomalies beneath the ice, geometric formations, large symmetrical ridges, and even what appear to be massive dome-like structures. One of the most discussed of these sites near the Ellsworth Mountains, deep within Queen Maud Land, where radar imaging has picked up patterns suggestive of artificial architecture, right angles, layered elevations, and uniformity rarely seen in natural formations. To the scientific community, these are intriguing but inconclusive. Most explanations involve subglacial volcanoes, fault lines, or unusual rock formations shaped by glacial movement. But to others, these scans hint at something far more unsettling. Theories about an ancient Antarctic civilization are not new. In the 16th century, long before Antarctica was officially discovered, the Turkish admiral Piri Reis compiled a map based on older sources. That map, preserved in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, shows the coastline of what many believe to be Antarctica, free of ice. According to scholars who have examined it, the map outlines river deltas, inlets, and mountain ranges with surprising accuracy. But how could such details have been recorded centuries before modern exploration, and more importantly, before the ice? Some believe the map is a remnant of a much older cartographic tradition, passed down from civilizations that predate recorded history. Could the builders of this Antarctic city have been the source of such ancient knowledge? Could they have watched the sea freeze around them, their temples entombed in ice as the world above forgot? Legends from distant cultures seem to echo this possibility. In Andean mythology, there are whispers of a white land to the south, ruled by gods of ice who vanished after a great upheaval. In early Vedic texts, one finds cryptic references to a city of mirrors lying in the farthest southern realm, where time was said to pass differently, and light reflected from stone walls like frozen fire. Even the Hopi people of North America speak of a world beneath the world, an origin point that some interpreters suggest may lie in the polar regions. Still, no conclusive evidence has ever been recovered. No ruins unearthed, no carvings translated. Access to the interior of Antarctica is tightly controlled, and expeditions are rare. International treaties prohibit excavation without explicit scientific purpose, and many areas remain off-limits due to harsh weather and logistical impossibility. And yet, strange stories persist. In 2002, a scientific team operating near Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake buried under 2 miles of ice, reported unexplained magnetic anomalies deep beneath the surface. Their findings were classified shortly afterward. In 2016, a private satellite company released images showing a massive, triangular structure protruding from the ice shelf near the Shackleton Range. Within days, the images were taken down without explanation. Is this merely the result of misinterpretation, optical illusions, overactive imaginations fueled by the allure of the unknown? Perhaps. But what if there is more? Some researchers suggest that the Antarctic city may not have been built by Homo sapiens at all, but by an earlier iteration of intelligent life, not extraterrestrial, but pre-human. A civilization that developed in isolation during a previous warm period, only to vanish without a trace as the Earth shifted. Others link the Antarctic enigma with the idea of a global cataclysm around 10,800 BC, a sudden planet-wide flood that obliterated entire civilizations, preserved only in myth and scattered ruins. Could the city beneath the ice be one of those lost capitals? A metropolis swallowed by time and frost, waiting for a future warm enough, or curious enough, to uncover it? We may never know. The ice is deep, the silence vast, and the secrets of Antarctica remain well hidden beneath layers of snow and secrecy. But something about the idea refuses to fade. Something draws us again and again to this white abyss at the bottom of the world, to its impenetrable stillness, and to the chilling possibility that beneath it all, something once lived, something once ruled. And if it did, what did it know? Let's keep going. The pre-flood world is vast, and its echoes are far from silent. From the glacial silence of Antarctica, our journey now leads us into warmer lands, lush, luminous, and veiled in ancient secrets. We enter a realm steeped in legend, where jungle vines wrap around stones that whisper of a past long buried. These are lands where the green never fades, where the emerald canopy stretches toward the sky like the vaulted ceilings of forgotten cathedrals. Here, in the heart of dense rainforests, the memory of a civilization pulses beneath moss and root. They are known by many names, but among those who seek their legacy, they are called the Emerald Builders. We begin in the Amazon basin, a region once dismissed as uninhabitable by early explorers, too dense, too wild, too unforgiving. For centuries, it was thought to have never supported complex civilization, and yet, the forest has started to speak. Over the past 2 decades, LiDAR technology, laser scanning from aircraft, has pierced the Emerald Veil. What it reveals beneath is astonishing. Networks of geometric earthworks, massive mounds, causeways, and even city grids. These structures span hundreds of kilometers, hidden for millennia beneath the rainforest's unrelenting growth. Some of them date back thousands of years, far earlier than any civilization previously thought to exist in the region. What kind of society left these marks? How did they shape such an expansive world, and why did it disappear without a trace? Archaeologists now believe the Amazon was once home to millions, a civilization, or perhaps a network of civilizations, capable of sophisticated land management, astronomy, and architecture. Their cities were not built in stone, but in earth and plant. Their temples may have been living things, grown rather than carved. And their technology? unlike anything we know. Some researchers point to the presence of terra preta, or dark earth, an engineered soil rich in carbon and nutrients spread across thousands of square miles. Unlike the surrounding acidic earth, this soil retains fertility for centuries. Its composition is still not fully understood. Was this the Emerald Builder's gift? A bioengineered legacy that turned hostile ground into a sustainable paradise? Mainstream scholars are beginning to rewrite the history of the Amazon, but many questions remain. Who organized these vast systems? How did they communicate across such distances? And where did they go? Local indigenous traditions may hold clues. In the myths of the Yanomami, the Ashaninka, and the Tucano, there are stories of ancient cities made of light and color, ruled by beings of deep wisdom and strange appearance. These figures are not gods in the traditional sense. They are remembered as teachers, architects, and watchers. Some tales speak of a great exodus, a retreat into the forest's deepest heart or into the earth itself, when a great flood or fire came from the sky. Echoes of these myths stretch far beyond South America. In Mesoamerican legend, there is the tale of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who brought knowledge from the east and vanished with the promise to return. In African lore, the Dogon speak of the Nomo, amphibious beings who came from the stars and seeded civilization. In Southeast Asia, temples lost to jungle, like those in Angkor and Java, suggest a pattern of vibrant life swallowed by the earth, only to resurface centuries later in moss-covered silence. Are we looking at independent cultural expressions, or fragments of a shared memory, of something ancient, global, and now almost erased? Among fringe researchers, the Emerald Builders are often associated with a legendary civilization said to predate the flood myths of the ancient world. Some link them to the elusive continent of Lemuria, another sunken land said to lie in the Indian or Pacific Oceans. Others suggest that the Emerald Builders were not confined to one place at all, but were a seafaring people, using rivers and oceans as roads, leaving behind seeds of knowledge wherever they went. Perhaps most intriguing is the connection to the so-called Emerald Tablets, a set of texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, himself a fusion of the Egyptian Thoth and the Greek Hermes. These writings, while esoteric and symbolic, speak of lost wisdom from a time before history, of a hidden land of emerald light, and of builders who harnessed the energies of nature, not by force, but through resonance and balance. Could these be poetic echoes of a real people? A society that aligned with the cycles of Earth rather than warring against them. One whose ruins now lie entangled in roots, their knowledge encoded in soils and stones too subtle for modern eyes. Skeptics urge restraint. Much of the evidence is circumstantial, and the jungle is quick to erase. Cities of wood and plant do not fossilize. Oral traditions are prone to transformation. And yet, the scale of what's been uncovered, and what still lies beneath, forces us to reconsider what we thought we knew. Why did we assume this vast green world had no history? Could it be that the Emerald Builders understood something we have forgotten? That civilization need not scar the earth to leave a legacy? That the deepest wisdom is not in domination, but in harmony? And if their knowledge survived, where is it now? Perhaps it still sleeps in the jungle, waiting to be remembered. Perhaps it speaks in the language of the trees, in the fertility of engineered soil, in the quiet alignment of ancient causeways we've only just begun to trace. The forest does not yield its secrets easily, but the Emerald Builders may yet have more to tell us. Let's move forward. The shadows of the pre-flood world still stretch across our modern one, and the journey is far from over. As we leave the tangled canopy of the Emerald Builders and step away from the living forest that may once have sheltered a civilization in harmony with nature, we begin to descend, not into water, nor into memory, but into the earth itself. Beneath our feet lies a world vast, layered, and largely unknown. A world we walk over daily, yet rarely consider. Caves that descend for miles, caverns so large they generate their own weather, chambers untouched by sunlight, where strange ecosystems flourish in silence. Could it be that long before the flood wiped clean the surface, another kind of civilization thrived, not above, but below? The idea is not new. Nearly every ancient culture has whispered of beings that dwell within the earth. From the Greeks, who spoke of Hades and hallowed realms beneath the mountains, to the Hopi, who told of their ancestors emerging from underground after a great destruction. In Hindu cosmology, the Patala realms lie beneath the surface, described not as places of punishment, but as beautiful and luminous worlds inhabited by powerful, advanced beings. The Tibetans speak of Shambhala, sometimes placed deep within the earth rather than beyond it. And even early Christian mystics hinted at secret domains hidden below the mountains. These are stories easily dismissed as myth, allegory. But what happens when ancient tales begin to intersect with modern anomalies? All around the world, we find evidence of vast subterranean structures, many of which have no clear explanation. The Derinkuyu complex in Cappadocia, Turkey, is one such marvel. A multi-level underground city carved directly into volcanic rock, capable of sheltering more than 20,000 people. Complete with ventilation shafts, wells, and even defenses, it was hidden from the world until a homeowner accidentally discovered it in 1963. No definitive record exists of who built it or when. Other sites, like the Erdstall tunnels of Europe, weave narrow, twisting passages beneath fields and villages, their purpose still unknown. Found in Germany, Austria, and beyond, they are too small for practical use, yet too precisely cut to be random. In Ecuador and Peru, deep cave systems like Cueva de los Tallos have revealed artificial-like formations, metallic artifacts, and rumors of hidden libraries carved in stone, though expeditions often end with more questions than answers. Are these simply refugees built in times of crisis, secret escape routes for war or persecution? Or are they the remnants of something older and far stranger? Some fringe researchers suggest that these are surface remnants, doorways perhaps, into a much deeper, hidden infrastructure, one that predates our current understanding of history. They point to tales of the Agarthan network, a proposed system of vast underground cities connected by tunnels that span continents. According to this theory, Earth once housed a civilization that moved beneath the surface to escape a catastrophe, possibly the very flood that reshaped the planet around 10,800 BC. Could it be that what we call myths are not fiction, but fragments of memory? That our ancestors once lived beneath the earth, whether out of necessity or design? The concept of a hollow earth has long occupied a strange space between science and speculation. Though modern geology confirms that the earth is layered and molten at its core, the notion of vast empty spaces beneath the crust is not as impossible as it once seemed. In recent years, seismologists have detected massive voids, low-density zones, and deep anomalies stretching hundreds of miles beneath our feet, places where sound waves behave unpredictably, and where known physics meets unknown variables. In 2014, a team of researchers discovered a massive water reservoir, locked in mineral form, nearly 400 miles below the surface. It was not a lake or an ocean, but its volume was so great it could fill the Atlantic 3 times over. Could ancient civilizations have known about these inner realms? Could they have reached them? Some point to strange traditions surrounding entrances to the inner earth: Mount Shasta in California, the Himalayan range, the Amazon basin, Antarctica. Even beneath the pyramids of Egypt, where closed shafts and sealed chambers may hint at something deeper than any tomb. These portals are often described in consistent terms: guarded, hidden, and leading to worlds of light beneath worlds of stone. Worlds inhabited not by monsters, but by beings of immense knowledge and eerie silence. Beings who did not perish in the flood, because they never lived above it. Skeptics, of course, remain grounded. They argue that ancient tunnels served practical, defensive purposes. That myths of underworlds reflect psychological archetypes: the descent into darkness, the hero's journey, the metaphor of death and rebirth. And perhaps they are right. But even so, the ground continues to yield its secrets. In 2018, researchers exploring caves beneath the Nahanni Valley in Canada, a region steeped in legend, reported electromagnetic anomalies and temperatures that defied environmental logic. In China, new cave systems reveal chambers so vast that clouds form inside them. In South America, native shamans speak of beings who live beneath and do not age, and who watch us through the roots. If a deep Earth civilization existed, what became of it? Did it collapse under pressure, like so many above? Did it evolve, growing ever deeper into the mantle's warmth? Or does it remain, hidden and intact, watching from below? And more unsettling still, if it is still there, is it silent by choice? The Earth holds more than stone and fire. It holds time, and memory, and possibly the remains of a civilization that did not rise, but descended. Let's keep going. We are not yet done with what lies beneath the surface of our forgotten world. From the silent depths of the Earth, we now rise, gently, into places where the veil between the visible and invisible seems to thin. Across the globe, scattered in deserts, mountains, and remote plateaus, there are locations where the air feels heavier, where compasses spin erratically, and where, by all accounts, reality behaves differently. Some call these places energy centers. Others refer to them as sacred sites. But among those who trace the outlines of ancient, pre-flood civilizations, they are known as the remnants of the Vortex Culture, a civilization not defined by territory or stone, but by its relationship to the forces that flow through the Earth itself. We begin in the American Southwest, amid the red rocks of Sedona, Arizona. Here, twisted juniper trees grow in unnatural spirals, and hikers report sensations of peace, awe, or, in some cases, intense disorientation. Scientists attribute these phenomena to magnetic anomalies and local mineral content. But indigenous tribes have long considered this land sacred. The Yavapai Apache speak of spirit wind corridors that connect the earth to the sky, and elders speak of ancient ones who could navigate these corridors, guiding energy, harnessing it, even shaping time. Similar patterns emerge across the world. In Wiltshire, England, where Stonehenge casts its ancient shadow, researchers have identified fluctuating geomagnetic fields within the stone circle's radius. In the Altai Mountains of Siberia, shamans describe natural doors that open during solstices, allowing access to knowledge from another realm. And in Peru's Sacred Valley, ancient Inca temples are aligned not only with celestial bodies, but with points of invisible earth energy, places the Inca called seques, which radiated from Cusco like spokes on a wheel. What connects all these sites? Why are so many of them built atop intersecting ley lines, hypothetical channels of energy that some believe crisscross the planet in a global grid? And why do so many pre-flood myths, from Mesopotamia to the Pacific, speak of a people who mastered the currents of Earth itself? The Vortex Culture, as some researchers have come to call it, may not have left behind monumental cities or written records, but their legacy, if it exists, might be encoded in the Earth's most subtle architecture, hidden in stone arrangements, subterranean chambers, and forgotten patterns etched across the land. Consider the ancient Nabta Playa site in Egypt's western desert, older than Stonehenge, where carefully positioned stones mark both solstices and celestial alignments. Beneath the sands, archaeologists discovered circular mounds and underground structures suggesting ritual use. But the site's orientation also hints at something deeper, an awareness of planetary and energetic flow. Or the Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming, a vast stone circle built atop a high-altitude peak, aligned with the heliacal rising of certain stars and possibly mapped along the same energetic principles. Native American oral traditions speak of the wheel as more than a calendar. It was a place of communion, of vision, of resonance with the forces beneath. Were these merely religious observances, or practical uses of a forgotten science? Fringe theorists suggest that the Vortex culture understood something we no longer do, that the Earth itself emits subtle vibrational energies through fault lines, crystalline deposits, and underground water, and that these energies can be concentrated, directed, even tuned. According to this view, megalithic structures around the world were not simply monuments, but instruments, resonators built to harmonize with Earth's frequency, creating zones of heightened perception, healing, or consciousness. Is it coincidence, they ask, that so many ancient cultures described gods or beings emerging from whirlwinds, spirals, or spinning disks of light? That across cultures, the spiral becomes a sacred symbol, from Celtic petroglyphs to Maori carvings, from Hopi kivas to Hindu yantras. Skeptics remain unconvinced. Magnetic anomalies, they argue, are natural, caused by subsurface geology. Sensations felt at vortex sites are psychological, amplified by expectation and suggestion. The idea of a vortex culture, they say, is a modern projection onto ancient places. And yet, the pattern persists. In Australia's outback, the Dreamtime stories of Aboriginal people speak of songlines, invisible paths across the land created by ancestral beings, which encode geography, direction, and memory into song. These songlines correspond uncannily with natural features and resource sites, suggesting an intimate, almost symbiotic knowledge of the land's energetic structure. In Tibet, monks speak of lungam, a meditative technique that allows a practitioner to move with supernatural speed across vast distances. They claim it is not a matter of will, but of flow, moving in harmony with currents beneath the surface. Could the Vortex culture have been a loosely connected web of such traditions, carried across continents by initiates who understood the world not as fixed, but as fluid? If so, what happened to them? Some believe the flood that ended their era was not simply water, but a disturbance in the planet's energy field, perhaps triggered by a cosmic event, a pole shift, or a disruption of balance. In this telling, the Vortex culture did not die out. It withdrew, its knowledge encoded in myth, symbol, and scattered temples, waiting for an age that might once again hear the hum beneath the stone. There is no proof, only coincidence, pattern, resonance. But in places where the wind moves strangely and stones align with stars, the question lingers. What did the ancients know that we have forgotten? Did they listen to the earth in a way we no longer do? Let us continue. The past is not always found in what we can touch, but sometimes in what we can feel. As we follow the subtle trails left by the Vortex culture, those who may have danced with the very energies of the earth, another presence begins to emerge from the shadows of antiquity. A presence neither bound to land nor stone, but remembered in whispers, etched into the earliest myths, and preserved in distant echoes across cultures. They are not known by a single name, yet everywhere they are remembered the same way: radiant, otherworldly, luminous, the Shining Ones. In the highlands of Mesopotamia, among the oldest ruins ever unearthed, Göbekli Tepe, Towering pillars rise from the soil, their carvings of stylized animals and abstract figures still sharp despite the passage of more than 11,000 years. Among the symbols, some researchers point to humanoid forms, tall, broad-shouldered, often headless or crowned with radiance. What or who did these ancient builders revere? Across the ancient Near East, the earliest Sumerian texts refer to the Annunaki, those who from heaven came. They were not simply gods, but teachers and judges, descending from the sky in shining garments. In Egypt, they appear as the Neteru, divine beings with radiant headdresses, whose knowledge birthed agriculture, writing, and cosmic order. In pre-Incan lore, the Viracochas arrived after a great flood, tall figures with pale skin and glowing eyes, bringing laws, language, and civilization to a broken world. Why does the motif of luminous, powerful beings recur so often, especially in stories rooted in the aftermath of catastrophe? The term Shining Ones itself is not modern invention. It appears in ancient Hebrew as Elohim, sometimes translated as those who shine, and again in Zoroastrian tradition as the Ahuras, divine beings of light and fire. The Book of Enoch describes angels as radiant and overwhelming, too bright for human eyes to bear. And in Celtic lore, the Tuatha De Danann, mysterious pre-Celtic figures, were said to have descended in glowing ships, their skin bright with light, wielding powers unknown to man. Were these simply gods, products of metaphor and imagination? Or could they represent something more, witnesses to a lost epoch, survivors or architects of the pre-flood world? Mainstream historians classify these accounts as myth, symbols for natural forces, or metaphors for noble lineages. And indeed, much of mythology can be understood through this lens. But some anomalies remain difficult to reconcile. In ancient Peru, high in the Andes, the ruins of Tiahuanaco, particularly the Gate of the Sun, bear solar motifs, cyclopean stones, and an air of forgotten significance. Local Aymara legends say the city was built by gods who walked among men, gods of light, who disappeared during a global deluge. In India, the Mahabharata and Rigveda describe the Devas, gods of light who flew in airborne chariots, wielding weapons of blinding brilliance. Their enemies, the Asuras, were also described as shining, fiery beings. Their battles were not metaphorical, but vivid and cataclysmic, involving earthquakes, burning skies, and vanished cities. Even in the heart of Africa, the Dogon people of Mali speak of the Nomo, beings of light and water who descended from the sky to bring structure and morality. They associate these shining ones with Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked eye, yet accurately described by the Dogon centuries before modern astronomy confirmed its existence. How could so many unrelated cultures invent similar stories of luminous beings descending from above, guiding humanity, and then vanishing before the age of kings and empires? Fringe theorists propose that the Shining Ones may have been a remnant of an advanced pre-flood civilization, either human, post-human, or something else entirely. They suggest these beings were not supernatural, but deeply knowledgeable, perhaps technologically advanced to the point of appearing divine. Their luminosity might not have been literal light, but symbolic of insight, intellect, or energy unknown to us. Others explore more esoteric interpretations, that the Shining Ones were interdimensional entities, able to shift between frequencies of reality. Their sudden appearance and disappearance across myths could point to a deeper understanding of space, time, or consciousness itself. Still, skepticism is warranted. Oral traditions evolve. Metaphor is powerful. Brightness is an easy symbol for wisdom, transcendence, or power. That these beings are shining may simply be how ancient people described the overwhelming nature of awe, of mystery, of something greater than themselves. But still, the consistency is hard to ignore. Why do the shining ones always appear at the edge of memory, before the flood, before history, bearing gifts of civilization and then vanishing into the mists? Why are they so often described not as gods to be feared, but as teachers, guardians, or watchers? And why are their temples, if they ever built them, so difficult to locate? Some believe that the Shining Ones never ruled from grand cities, but moved among people in liminal places, mountaintops, sacred groves, deep caves, and high deserts. They worked not in stone, but in symbol, in vibration, in the architecture of language, law, and time. Their legacy might not be ruins we can excavate, but ideas we've mistaken as our own. Could it be that what we call civilization was not invented, but inherited? And if the Shining Ones were real, what happened to them? Did they perish in the cataclysm they foresaw? Did they retreat into the earth, the sky, or something else entirely? Or are they still here, not as luminous beings of myth, but hidden in plain sight, their glow dimmed by the ages? We do not know, but their presence lingers, in temples aligned with the stars, in myths older than writing, in the uncanny silence that sometimes fills the air at sacred sites, as if something once stood there, watching, waiting. Let's continue. The pre-flood world is not yet done revealing its keepers. From the radiant myths of the Shining Ones, those luminous beings who may have shaped the earliest sparks of civilization, we now turn our gaze westward, to a land far removed from the deserts of Mesopotamia or the stone sanctuaries of Egypt. A land of rolling fog, ancient forests, and forgotten hills. Here, in the dense and mist-veiled mountains of the eastern United States, an older whisper takes root. One that speaks not of a native beginning, but of an inheritance. A colony, perhaps, established long before recorded history began. A relic of Atlantis, hidden in the highlands of Appalachia. Stretching from Alabama to New York, the Appalachian Mountains are among the oldest ranges on Earth, some of their formations dating back over 480 million years. Their stone, older than the Himalayas or the Alps, has borne witness to epochs of change. The forests that cover these slopes are deep and diverse, concealing within them countless caves, strange stone circles, and ridges shaped not entirely by nature. Local legends, particularly among the Cherokee and early colonial settlers, have long hinted at strange truths buried in these hills. Stories of moon-eyed people, described as pale, small-statured beings who could not see in daylight and who vanished suddenly, leaving behind mounds and stone walls. The Cherokee believed these beings were already living in the land when they arrived, and that they came from the east, over the Great Water. Across the region, mysterious stone ruins remain unexplained. The wall of Fort Mountain in Georgia, for instance, stretches over 850 feet along a mountain ridge. Made of stacked stones with no binding mortar, it serves no clear defensive purpose. Similar stoneworks appear in Alabama, Tennessee, and even the forests of West Virginia. Mainstream archaeologists often attribute them to Native American cultures or early settlers, but many of these structures predate known tribal occupations and lack any cultural markers, pottery shards, or tools that would help date them. Who built them, and why? Some researchers have suggested that these are remnants not of isolated tribes, but of a much older presence, one tied to the legend of Atlantis itself. According to Plato's account, Atlantis was a vast seafaring empire that existed over 9,000 years before Solon's time, placing its destruction around 11,600 BC. It was said to have dispatched colonies to distant shores, bringing with them knowledge, architecture, and law. Most have focused on the Mediterranean and Caribbean as possible sites. But what if one such colony pushed even farther, reaching the eastern shores of North America and establishing a foothold in the mountainous terrain of what would one day be Appalachia? While mainstream historians find this unlikely, there are fragments that stir curiosity. The presence of copper tools and artifacts in prehistoric European sites made from pure Great Lakes copper has long puzzled archaeologists. How did Old World civilizations acquire material that could only have come from North America? Could transatlantic contact have occurred thousands of years before Columbus? Even more intriguing are the accounts of early European explorers in the 16th and 17th centuries who encountered tribes in the interior Appalachians with unexpected features: gray or blue eyes, lighter skin, and complex oral traditions about ancestors arriving from over the sea. While much of this has been romanticized and often distorted, some early accounts, including those by Spanish chroniclers, describe white tribes in the southeastern woodlands with stone-built villages and practices unlike neighboring peoples. Fringe theorists propose that these people, who eventually blended with or were displaced by later indigenous groups, may have been the distant descendants of Atlantean settlers. Isolated over millennia, cut off after the cataclysm that submerged their homeland, they may have clung to fragments of their heritage, rituals, symbols, or methods of construction, until time and wilderness eroded all but the faintest traces. Then there are the mounds. Scattered throughout the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys, but also found in parts of Appalachia, are massive earthworks shaped like animals, spirals, and even astronomical alignments. The Serpent Mound in southern Ohio coils across the land with a precision that seems almost otherworldly. While attributed to the Adena or Hopewell cultures, the true origins of some mounds remain disputed. Some scholars argue that the base layers of these structures are far older than the cultures that later built upon them. Could the mounds, the walls, and the myths be echoes of an Atlantean offshoot, one that settled far from its origin, adapted to the mountain landscape, and left behind only shadow and stone? Skeptics urge restraint. Oral histories are fluid. Stone ruins are often misinterpreted. There is no definitive evidence, no inscriptions, no unambiguous artifacts. And yet, the mystery persists. Why are the oldest structures in Appalachia so difficult to date? Why do so many cultures describe people who came before, only to vanish? And why do we so often assume that great civilizations must have only risen in the Old World? In the hushed groves of the Smokies, in the shadowy ridges of the Blue Ridge Mountains, there are places where silence feels heavy. As if the earth remembers something we do not. As if, beneath layers of soil and time, the stones are still watching. Perhaps the Appalachian Mountains do not just hold the memory of ancient rivers and tectonic shifts, but something else. Something built. Something lost. Something waiting to be rediscovered. Let us continue. The past, it seems, reaches further than we imagined, through flood, through forest, through myth. From the mist-veiled mountains of Appalachia, where whispers of lost Atlantean colonies linger among stone walls and forgotten myths, our path now leads us eastward. Past the deserts and temples of the ancient world, beyond the rivers of time, into a land where history is not a straight line, but a wheel. A land that speaks not of a single lost civilization, but of entire cycles of rise and fall. This is India, a place where memory stretches into cosmic time, and where the idea of forgotten epochs is not theory, but scripture. Here, in the dense Sanskrit verses of the Mahabharata, the Puranas, and the Surya Siddhanta, we find references not just to kings and dynasties, but to yugas, vast ages of humanity, each governed by its own laws, energies, and beings. According to ancient Hindu cosmology, we do not live in the first world, but in the latest flicker of a cycle that has repeated itself many times. Before our current age, the Kali Yuga, there were three others: the Dvapara, the Treta, and the Satya Yuga. Each one older, each one higher in consciousness, each one culminating in destruction and renewal. But what if these ages were not only symbolic? What if they represent real phases of human civilization, real peoples, real cultures, rising and vanishing in sync with celestial rhythms we no longer understand? In the Satya Yuga, the first and longest of the four, it is said that truth reigned supreme. Humanity lived in harmony with nature, and suffering was almost unknown. Technology, if it existed, was not mechanical, but vibrational, spiritual. Telepathy, levitation, and instantaneous travel appear in early texts not as miracles, but as normal abilities. Is this poetic myth, or the distant memory of a civilization that operated on principles we no longer grasp? The shift into the Treta Yuga brought decline, but also the birth of great cities and mighty figures. The Ramayana, dated by some interpretations to as early as 5000 BC, speaks of flying chariots called Vimanas, vast architectural marvels like the golden city of Lanka, and weapons that could burn the sky and dry up the oceans. These descriptions, while framed in mythic language, have drawn the attention of researchers who see them as possible allegories for advanced pre-flood technology, energy weapons, airborne machines, even nuclear-like events. Modern archaeologists have often dismissed such claims, citing the lack of material evidence. But questions remain. In places like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, once part of the Indus Valley Civilization, strange anomalies have been reported. Vitrified stone walls, skeletons with unusually high radiation levels, and sudden abandonment with no clear explanation. Most scholars attribute these to natural disaster or decline in trade. Others wonder, could they be remnants of a forgotten catastrophe at the end of a yuga? As the Dvapara Yuga dawned, humanity moved further from harmony. But great knowledge was still present. Epics describe massive engineering feats, battle formations in the sky, and sages who commanded elemental forces. It is in this age that the Mahabharata takes place, depicting a war of such scale and devastation that, according to the text, it changed the face of the earth. One passage describes a weapon that produced a column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns. The corpse's hair fell out. Food was poisoned. Critics argue this is hyperbole, but others note its disturbing resemblance to the effects of atomic detonation. Is it possible that the Yuga system encodes the memories of successive civilizations, each destroyed not by myth, but by real, cyclical upheavals? According to the Surya Siddhanta, one of the most ancient astronomical treatises known to man, yugas are linked to celestial alignments, precession of the equinoxes, axial shifts, planetary conjunctions. These are not just spiritual ages, but measurable epochs written in the stars. Mainstream science recognizes precessional cycles. One complete wobble of Earth's axis takes roughly 26,000 years. The Vedic system divides this cycle into ascending and descending arcs, suggesting that as we move through space, our consciousness and our civilizations rise and fall in tandem. Could humanity's forgotten past be the result not of a single flood or extinction event, but of recurring astronomical forces? And if so, how many civilizations have risen and disappeared before us? What's remarkable is how consistent this cyclical worldview is across other ancient traditions. The Greeks spoke of the Golden, Silver, Bronze, and Iron Ages, each progressively darker. The Maya described world ages called suns, each ending in destruction. The Hopi tell of previous worlds consumed by fire, flood, and ice. In Norse myth, Ragnarok resets the cosmos only for it to begin again. What are we to make of this convergence? Skeptics argue that these are archetypal patterns, common psychological themes embedded in myth. That ancient cultures, observing the seasons, projected similar cycles onto human history. Perhaps. But what if they weren't merely projecting? What if they were remembering? The terrifying beauty of the Yuga-Shift model is its scale. It does not simply suggest one lost civilization, but many. It does not locate a single Atlantis or Lemuria, but layers upon layers of forgotten worlds, each more distant, more alien, and more unknowable than the last. If true, the civilizations of the Satya and Treta Yugas would be beyond our imagination, vast in wisdom, unfamiliar in form, terrifying in power. And now, according to the texts, we stand deep in the Kali Yuga, the age of conflict and spiritual decline. But even this age, too, will end. In fire, in collapse, and from its ashes, a new cycle will begin. Do the ruins beneath our feet belong to the previous world, or the one before that? And what traces, if any, will remain of us? The clock, it seems, is not linear. It turns in silence, unseen, marking the rise and fall of civilizations far older, and perhaps far stranger, than anything we've yet dared to believe. Let us keep going. The memory of these worlds may be closer than we think. As the echoes of the Yuga-Shift civilizations fade, remnants of worlds lost not to time, but to cosmic rhythm, we now descend once again into Earth's greenest abyss. A place where light itself seems filtered through a curtain of time, where rivers twist like ancient veins, and the air holds the weight of untold centuries. We are in the heart of the Amazon. Among its endless forests, shielded by thick canopies and guarded by silence, lies a story whispered by explorers, tribal elders, and a single mysterious manuscript, the legend of Akakor. In 1972, a German journalist named Karl Brugger published the Chronicle of Akakor, based on interviews with a man who called himself Tatunka Nara, a supposed prince of an underground jungle kingdom. According to Tatunka, Akakor was a hidden city of stone, carved into the mountains between Brazil and Peru, founded over 15,000 years ago by gods who came from the skies. These gods, he said, taught his ancestors the arts of building, astronomy, and writing. Then they left, promising to return. To most, it was fiction, a fabricated tale steeped in science fiction and colonial fantasy. But fragments of the Akakor story began to intersect with something far more unsettling: the geography of the Amazon itself. Despite its remoteness, the Amazon basin is riddled with ancient enigmas. Massive earthen geometries, circles, squares, and complex designs have been discovered using LiDAR, hidden for millennia beneath trees and vines. These geoglyphs, some dating back more than 2,000 years, hint at large, organized societies, contradicting the long-held belief that the Amazon could not support advanced pre-Columbian civilizations. But if these traces are only a few thousand years old, what might still lie deeper beneath the layers of jungle and flood? According to Tatunka Nara, Akakor was part of a network of 13 subterranean cities, connected by tunnels that stretched for hundreds of miles beneath the earth. These tunnels, he claimed, predated the flood that destroyed the First World, a flood sent by the gods to cleanse the earth. The surviving elite fled underground, carrying with them knowledge, tools, and sacred artifacts. They would re-emerge only when the world was ready. Such tales bear a striking resemblance to other mythologies found across the globe: flood survivors, underground refuges, sky gods teaching early humans. But are these shared symbols or shared memories? Local indigenous legends across the Amazon also tell of ancient, vanishing cities. The Kaksinawa speak of a land beneath the earth where light is constant and death never comes. The Mayaruna whisper of golden cities swallowed by the jungle. Even the Inca, far to the west, spoke of Paititi, a hidden city of great knowledge and lost gods, buried somewhere in the eastern forests beyond the Andes. For centuries, explorers sought these places and found only trees, heat, and death. Percy Fawcett, the famed British explorer, believed a city like Akakor, what he called Z, existed deep in the jungle. He vanished in 1925 while searching for it. Others followed. Many never returned. Yet clues remain. In 2001, satellite imagery revealed what appeared to be rectilinear patterns under the forest canopy in western Brazil. Possible city layouts, roads, canals. More recently, in 2018, LiDAR surveys in the Bolivian Amazon exposed vast urban planning systems, plazas, causeways, even pyramidal mounds, hidden beneath the trees. These discoveries suggest a cultural complexity far greater than previously assumed. Still, Akakor is not mentioned in known archaeological records. Its name doesn't appear in Quechua or Tupi, or in any native language catalogued by modern linguists. Was it a fabrication? A hoax designed for profit or personal myth-making? Perhaps. But there's something peculiar about how persistently the story clings to the region's deeper mysteries. The Chronicle of Akakor describes a flood not unlike the ones found in Sumerian, Biblical, and Vedic texts, a global catastrophe that marks the end of one civilization and the beginning of another. The survivors, according to the account, were not primitive. They were keepers of ancient knowledge, retreating underground to preserve what the surface could no longer hold. This idea, of a hidden remnant of a pre-flood culture living beneath our world, echoes once again the stories of Agartha, Shambhala, and the Deep Earth civilizations. Could Akakor be another piece in that global puzzle? Some researchers have attempted to tie Tatunka Nara's account to obscure archaeological finds, strange stone structures along the Purus River, petroglyphs in Acre that seem to depict star-like symbols and humanoid figures with elongated heads. Others argue that the entire narrative is too contaminated by invention to be trusted, and perhaps they're right. But the Amazon is a place that resists finality. Even today, more than 80 uncontacted tribes are believed to live deep within its folds. Its soil, blackened with ancient bioengineered terra preta, still yields crops centuries after being abandoned. Its rivers conceal sunken temples, uncharted caves, and buried cities yet to be named. So, if a people once fled the surface to preserve their knowledge, if they built beneath the forest, waiting for a world that could once again hear their voice, where would we expect to find them, if not here? Akakor may be a name invented, a story shaped by fantasy, but what it points toward, a memory of catastrophe, survival, and something deeply advanced hiding beneath the veil of jungle, is not unique. It is a motif repeated so often, across so many lands, that its absence would be more suspicious than its presence. And so we must ask, beneath the rivers, beyond the ruins, under the roots of the oldest trees, is there still something watching, listening, waiting? Let us continue, for the jungle is not done speaking, and the floodwaters may have buried more than we've ever dared imagine. From the tangled shadows of Akakor's jungle myths, where flood, memory, and subterranean secrets intertwine, we now cross continents to a different kind of silence. A silence shaped not by vegetation, but by stone. A silence that radiates heat by day and an otherworldly stillness by night. Here, on the scorched plateaus of Egypt, the story of civilization begins again, or perhaps begins before. At the edge of the Nile, beneath layers of sand and narrative, lies an enigma, the Osirian Civilization. a name not found in standard textbooks, but whispered among researchers who suspect Egypt's true origins stretch far beyond the dynasties of pharaohs, deep into prehistory, into a time before the flood, before the gods of men were carved in recognizable form. We begin at Abydos, one of Egypt's oldest sacred sites. To most, it is known as the burial place of Osiris, the god of death and resurrection. But beneath the later temples and crumbled tombs, something else lies hidden: the Osirian. Unlike the surrounding structures, which are carved in traditional dynastic styles, the Osirian is different. It rests sunken into the ground, constructed from massive granite blocks weighing up to 100 tons each, far larger and rougher than anything built during Seti I-'s reign, to whom the surrounding temple complex is attributed. The stones are fitted with a level of precision reminiscent of other megalithic mysteries around the world, echoing the stonework of Peru, Baalbek, and even Göbekli Tepe. Why would a temple from the New Kingdom era be built atop a structure using techniques associated with civilizations far older? Did the pharaohs inherit these foundations rather than create them? Mainstream Egyptology maintains that the Osirian was built as a symbolic tomb for Osiris by Seti I, even though its architectural style and materials differ significantly from the rest of his temple. No inscriptions detail its construction. No records explain its purpose. It simply exists, hewn into the bedrock as if placed by another age. Could this be the last remnant of a pre-flood civilization, one that the later Egyptians remembered not as historical fact, but as myth? The god Osiris is central to Egypt's spiritual identity. He is the bringer of agriculture, the first to teach mankind how to live in balance with nature, and the ruler of the underworld. But the oldest myths describe him not as a purely divine figure, but as a king. A being who reigned on earth during a golden age before being betrayed, dismembered, and resurrected. According to the pyramid texts, Osiris was already ancient by the time the pyramids were raised. Some scholars suggest Osiris may represent a deified memory of an actual being, an echo of a forgotten leader from a distant epoch, one whose presence marked a civilizing moment in a world recovering from catastrophe. The idea of an Osirian civilization suggests that the early gods of Egypt, Osiris, Isis, Thoth, Horus, were not invented by the dynastic Egyptians, but inherited. Perhaps not gods at all, but beings remembered from an earlier age. Teachers, builders, survivors of a deluge. This echoes Plato's description of Atlantis, which he claimed was lost in 9600 BC, a date eerily close to the end of the Younger Dryas, a period of abrupt climate change and global flooding. According to Egyptian priests who spoke to Solon, the Egyptians themselves had records stretching back 9,000 years before his time. Those records, they said, described other worlds, other civilizations, wiped clean by water and flame. Where are those records now? Some believe the Hall of Records, a legendary archive said to be hidden beneath the Sphinx or elsewhere in Egypt, contains remnants of this pre-dynastic knowledge. While no such chamber has been conclusively discovered, ground-penetrating radar studies near the Sphinx have identified unexplained voids beneath its paws. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities has been reluctant to pursue further excavation. Then, there's the issue of water erosion on the Sphinx itself, particularly along its enclosure walls. Geologists like Robert Schoch have argued that the deep, vertical weathering patterns suggest prolonged rainfall, possibly dating back to 7000 BC or earlier, long before the official timeline of the Sphinx's construction. Could the Sphinx, the Osirian, and other enigmatic sites be the final weathered expressions of a civilization long since erased? And if so, what kind of world was it? The Osirian myth tells of a land ruled by harmony, where the Nile flowed in rhythm with the stars, and life was guided not by conquest, but by wisdom. A civilization not measured by its wars, but by its understanding of cycles, of life, death, and rebirth. Its knowledge was not encoded in words, but in resonance, symbol, and alignment. We still do not know how the Osirian was built. No quarry nearby could have yielded those stones. No papyrus records the method. The deeper we dig, the older and more enigmatic the foundations seem to become. Could it be that the Osirian civilization was not simply a forgotten chapter in human history, but a prelude to it? That our oldest religions, our oldest myths, are dim memories of a time when gods walked as kings, and stone was shaped not by hand, but by understanding? Or is this too a mirror, reflecting our desire to find continuity in chaos, legacy in silence? The stones do not answer, but they endure. Let us go further. The flood may have washed the names away, but the foundations remain. From the weathered stone foundations of the Osirian legacy, buried deep beneath Egypt's sands and myths, we now turn to a colder, stranger horizon. Beyond the boundaries of most maps, beyond the edge of memory, we move north, where the sea darkens and the air grows thin with ancient silence. This is the realm the Greeks called Thule, a place of freezing mists, midnight suns, and forgotten power. But what exactly was Thule? First mentioned by Pytheas, a Greek explorer in the 4th century BC, Thule was described as the northernmost land reachable by ship beyond the British Isles, where the ocean turned to a gelatinous substance and the sun barely set. Pytheas never claimed to have landed there, only that he saw it from afar. Later, Roman writers dismissed his account as fantasy, and yet the name lingered. Thule became a symbol, a riddle, and for some, a memory. What if Thule was more than a poetic reference to the edge of the known world? What if it once hosted a civilization that thrived not by bronze or conquest, but by knowledge? A hidden imperium rooted not in empire, but in alchemy. Scattered through esoteric texts, medieval grimoires, and whispered traditions, we find curious traces of a lost northern kingdom, one not ruled by swords, but by secrets. In Renaissance Europe, the term Ultima Thule began to appear in maps and alchemical diagrams, often associated with transformation, hidden wisdom, and the eternal return. Some mystics spoke of Thule as the birthplace of alchemy itself, a place where matter and spirit met in balance, where science and myth had not yet been separated. Could it be that Thule was not only a place, but a state of knowledge? A civilization that mastered the deep, symbolic understanding of nature's laws long before such terms existed? Legends describe the inhabitants of this land as pale-skinned, tall, and serene, draped not in regal robes, but in simple garments marked with arcane symbols. They worked not with tools, but with harmonics, frequencies, and metals, whose names have since been forgotten. They did not build empires of stone, but of transformation. Some tales speak of glowing towers that shimmered in the snow, of libraries carved from ice, of consciousness elevated through ritual and resonance. Of course, mainstream historians regard Thule as mythical, perhaps Iceland or the coasts of Norway, a misinterpreted outpost confused through centuries of retelling. And yet, certain details remain curiously persistent. For example, the Hyperborean tradition, closely linked to Thule in many esoteric circles, describes a land beyond the north wind, where the sun shone perpetually and people lived in harmony for thousands of years. Greek accounts place Hyperborea somewhere near the Arctic Circle. The people of that land were said to be long-lived, wise, and untouched by sickness. Their knowledge came not from conquest, but from attunement with the cosmos. Some researchers suggest a link between these myths and the Yuga cycles of India, both pointing to an earlier, purer age of human existence. Could Thule, or Hyperborea, have been a real pre-flood civilization, one that existed during a temperate Arctic era long before glacial ice swallowed its cities? Recent geological studies show that parts of the Arctic were once green. Core samples from beneath the Greenland ice sheet contain pollen, plant matter, even traces of flowing water. Around 10,000 BC, at the end of the Younger Dryas, rapid shifts in climate could have rendered the high north briefly habitable, before it was buried in cold and silence. If a civilization did exist there, its ruins would now lie beneath miles of ice. No temples to excavate, no artifacts to recover, only the myth and the magnetism. Interestingly, some of the Earth's strongest and strangest magnetic anomalies are found near the poles. In certain areas, compasses spin erratically, timekeeping becomes unreliable, and even GPS systems falter. Pilots flying over these zones have reported disorientation, malfunctioning instruments, and, in rare cases, unexplained visual phenomena. Curtains of light bending in unnatural patterns, as if something beneath the ice were still active. Fringe theorists suggest that the alchemic Imperium of Thule may not have vanished, but withdrawn. Its people, according to some interpretations, had long mastered not only physical alchemy, the transformation of base metals into gold, but also spiritual alchemy, the elevation of consciousness. In doing so, they may have transitioned into a different state of being altogether. Not dead, not lost, simply elsewhere. And if this civilization once operated at the boundary of the material and the immaterial, might it still be influencing the world through ideas, symbols, and forgotten rites passed down in secret? Could echoes of Thule's teachings have seeded the Hermetic texts of Alexandria, the alchemical treatises of the Middle Ages, or the mystical diagrams of the Rosicrucians and the early Enlightenment thinkers? To this day, references to Thule persist in quiet corners of esoteric literature, not as a political power, but as a spiritual axis, a polar mythos around which the great wheel of time turns, not a kingdom to rule, but a geometry to awaken, its teachings encrypted in number, symbol, and sound. Skeptics dismiss all of this, of course, as symbolic overreach, the projection of myth onto maps. But what if the very absence of evidence is the point? What if Thule's greatest alchemy was not the transmutation of metal, but of memory? The crafting of a civilization so subtle, so attuned, that when the waters rose and the ice returned, it did not leave ruins, but resonance? And if the cold still holds its secret, beneath the auroras, beyond the wind, and beneath the endless white, what would we find if we listened closely? Let us continue. The path grows colder, but not quieter. Ice. Our journey now turns downward again, but not into darkness, into silence, into myth. Beneath mountains and jungles, deserts and seas, there exists a legend so persistent, so quietly echoed across continents, that it refuses to fade. A civilization not of the stars, nor of the sea, but of the earth itself. Agartha. Agartha is known to many as the inner world, a hidden realm said to lie deep within the earth, accessed only through forgotten portals in the Himalayas, the Andes, or the poles. But before there were gates to enter, before the world cracked and turned inward, there may have been another chapter. A time when the Agarthans lived above, on the surface, when they walked among early humanity, as teachers, as builders, as something more. High in the Himalayas, cloaked in snow and thin air, the legends still survive. Monasteries in Tibet tell of Shambhala, the radiant capital of the inner world, governed by beings of immense wisdom. But older than Shambhala are the tales of the surface ones, those who came before the retreat, before the descent into the earth. These ancestors, it is said, lived in a world of balance. They understood not just nature, but the nature behind nature. They spoke in frequencies, built with sound, harnessed subtle energies that modern science is only beginning to name. Is this simply spiritual allegory? Or is it the fading memory of a pre-flood civilization, one that once stood upon the surface before vanishing beneath it? In 19th century theosophy, Helena Blavatsky spoke of root races and ancient peoples who came from lands now lost, Atlantis, Lemuria, Hyperborea, and whose descendants fled underground to preserve their knowledge after global cataclysm. While much of her writing is now considered controversial or speculative, she was not alone in pointing to a forgotten people whose legacy lies hidden beneath both stone and metaphor. All across the world, traditions speak of beings who emerged from below or retreated into the earth. But what if those were not beginnings, but endings? What if the Agarthan civilizations we imagine underground were originally surface-dwelling cultures, highly advanced, possibly pre-flood? And what we now call Agartha is a refuge, not a point of origin. The Andes hold some of the strongest echoes of this. In the highlands of Peru and Bolivia, certain Incan legends describe ancestors who fled underground after the world was engulfed in water and fire. The entrances, they say, still exist, near Lake Titicaca, in the caverns of the Amazon, beneath the ruins of Pumapunku. Some of these sites, particularly in Tiahuanaco, feature megalithic stonework so precise, so beyond the reach of pre-Columbian tools, that their origins remain unexplained. Are these the remnants of an Agarthan surface culture, one that knew the flood was coming and left markers in stone? Then there is Mount Kailash in Tibet, a peak never climbed, considered sacred by Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and Bonpo alike. According to Tibetan tradition, it is a spiritual center of the world. Some say it hides an entrance, but others, drawing on older myths, suggest it was once a throne, a capital, a surface bastion of Agarthan civilization before the shift inward. Interestingly, Kailash is aligned in ways that mirror ancient temples in Egypt and Angkor, suggesting some shared understanding of celestial architecture. Its pyramidal symmetry is uncanny, its isolation complete, and no one knows what lies inside. But perhaps the most compelling question is not where the Agarthan ancestors lived, but what they were. Not necessarily alien, not necessarily human as we understand it, but something in between. Descriptions of these beings across traditions vary. Sometimes they are tall and radiant, other times pale and austere. They are rarely portrayed as conquerors, but as watchers, custodians, even stewards of natural law. They lived in what the ancients called harmony, a word that modern civilization often interprets as aesthetic or emotional, but may once have had a deeper technical meaning. Harmony as a technology, as a science of balance, resonance, and unseen forces. Could the Agarthan surface civilization have been the last world culture before the Great Flood? A people who lived in balance not just with the environment, but with planetary rhythms? And when the balance broke, did they descend not as an act of fear, but as a retreat into memory, into safekeeping? Some researchers believe the legends of the Agarthan retreat mirror those of the mythical Nephilim, giants who walked the earth, taught forbidden knowledge, and were driven away by flood. Others see parallels in the Vedic accounts of Asuras, mighty, intelligent beings who lived underground after being cast out from the celestial realms. Could these be distorted memories of the same civilization, reinterpreted through different cultural lenses? Skeptics argue, of course, that this is mythology dressed as history, that Agartha is a spiritual metaphor, a reflection of inwardness, not a literal place. But what if it is both? What if, as with so many ancient concepts, the line between physical truth and metaphysical meaning was never meant to be separate. The Earth has depths we still do not understand, caves we have never mapped, cavities so vast they could house cities. Anomalous readings from deep radar, unexplained seismic echoes, and even ancient maps suggest there is more to the world beneath our feet than we know. And if something truly ancient went downward, thousands of years ago, to wait, to watch, to remember, how would we know? Perhaps the clues are not in ruins or relics, but in the very silence we feel at sacred mountains, in the precision of ancient alignments, in the way certain stories endure, long after their names are forgotten. Who were the Agarthan surface ancestors? Were they the final chapter of a forgotten golden age, or the prologue to one still to come? Let us go deeper still. The past may not be gone, it may simply have moved beneath the surface. From the depths of Agartha, where memory may have retreated into silence and stone, we now return to the surface, but not the modern world. We descend into a time so distant that even myth begins to blur. A time before known kings, before the pyramids, before the flood. In a land between two rivers, beneath layers of silt and sand, a name endures: the Annunaki. Ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, is often called the cradle of civilization. It is here, in the fertile plains of Sumer, that we find the first writing system, the first legal codes, and some of the first monumental temples. But buried within these early records, etched into clay tablets with sharp reeds, lies a story far older than empires, a story of gods, of cosmic conflict, and of a creation not quite our own. The Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki as divine beings who came from the heavens. Their name itself means those who came down from above. Unlike later deities, these figures were not abstract embodiments of natural forces. They had ranks, councils, disagreements. They gave orders, built structures, and according to the Atrahasis epic, they created mankind. But what was the first creation? The tablets do not begin with humanity as we know it, but with something else. A world governed by the Anunnaki themselves, where labor had become unbearable. The lower ranks, called the Igigi, were tasked with maintaining the earth, digging canals, moving earth, watching the stars. Eventually, they rebelled. In response, the Anunnaki gods, led by Enki and Ninhursag, devised a solution: a worker species, a helper, something between divine and earthly, something that could carry the burden of the gods. This was not merely myth, it was process, detailed, methodical, and disturbingly clinical. The tablets speak of blood mixed with clay, of gestation in the womb of a goddess, of trials and errors, failed creations, beings who could not speak, others who could not stand, until finally, success. A human. Yet some researchers argue that this first creation may not have been us, that the initial experiments resulted in something different, a race neither divine nor fully human, beings who were stronger, perhaps more intelligent, but unstable, or too independent, or too difficult to control. These early creations, referred to obliquely in texts as primitive man or the ones before, are never fully described. But some scholars point to hints in the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, which speaks of monstrous hybrids, of beings forged in chaos and sealed away. Were these mythological symbols, allegories for the chaos before order? Or were they memories? The notion of a forgotten pre-human race is not unique to Mesopotamia. In nearly every ancient tradition, there are tales of a first people, giants, titans, demigods, who lived before the current world. The Greeks spoke of the Golden Age, a time when divine beings lived among mortals. The Egyptians had the Zep Tepi, the first time, ruled by god-kings. The Mayans told of previous worlds destroyed by their creators because their inhabitants were flawed or disobedient. Could these be distorted echoes of the Anunnaki's first creation? Fringe theorists suggest that the early human prototypes were genetically engineered by an advanced race, not gods, but extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings. According to this theory, the Anunnaki were not deities, but advanced intelligences with technological capabilities far beyond our own. The stories of clay and blood are interpreted as metaphors for genetic manipulation, early DNA experimentation cloaked in the poetic language of myth. But even within mainstream archaeology, questions remain. How did Sumerian civilization appear so suddenly, so complete? Why does the earliest writing already include complex cosmology, advanced mathematics, and detailed astronomical knowledge? Why do some early tablets refer to specific celestial bodies, such as the outer planets, long before telescopes existed? There is, too, the curious reference in Sumerian texts to a planet called Nibiru, the supposed home of the Anunnaki. Often associated with a long elliptical orbit, it is said to return every few thousand years, bringing upheaval. Most scientists dismiss this as mythological metaphor or a misreading of astronomical symbols. And yet, the persistence of the story draws attention, particularly when paired with global flood myths and unexplained planetary events in the distant past. Could the Anunnaki's first creation have existed during a previous climatic epoch, perhaps before the Younger Dryas, before the flood? And if so, what became of them? Some believe that remnants of these first creations linger in global mythology, the giants of Genesis, the Nephilim, the Watchers, beings too powerful, too disruptive to remain. The Book of Enoch speaks of divine beings who intermingled with early humans and taught forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, astronomy, magic. Their children were unnatural, ungovernable, and ultimately destroyed by the flood. Was this the real reason for the cataclysm? Not punishment, but containment? If so, then our ancestors, the modern human race, may not have been the Anunnaki's first creation, but their replacement. A second attempt, a more manageable version of intelligence, clever enough to serve, but limited enough to control. And if this is true, is it possible that traces of the first creation still exist? In our myths, in our DNA, in the stories we tell of gods and monsters, of ancient knowledge lost and forbidden. The tablets remain silent, their cuneiform characters chipped and eroded by time. But in their careful order, in their measured lines, we sense something more than fable. A structure, a history, a memory passed forward in the only way it could survive. Who were the Anunnaki, really? Scientists? Custodians? Interveners in a world not their own? And what, exactly, did they create first? Let us move forward. The deeper we dig, the less certain the beginning becomes. From the etched clay tablets of ancient Sumer, where the Anunnaki may have crafted a first creation now lost to time, we shift our gaze skyward. But not to the heavens as a concept of faith or imagination. Instead, we turn to the physical sky, and to the stones that fell from it, stones that shaped myths, stones that may have shaped civilizations, and perhaps beings who came with them. Scattered across Africa's rain-soaked heartlands, beneath the roots of dense jungles and the red dust of savannas, lies a tale seldom told outside quiet circles. A story passed down by elders in hushed tones, carried in memory more than manuscript. It is the story of the Sky Stone people, a name given by some to a forgotten race linked not to the earth, but to the stars, and to the mysterious materials they left behind. In the 1990s, a strange discovery in Sierra Leone caught the attention of researchers around the world. Local tribes spoke of sky stones, bluish, ceramic-like fragments that, according to oral tradition, had fallen from the sky in the distant past. These stones were not metallic, like common meteorites, but brittle and opaque, with a pale blue hue that seemed almost artificial. Geological testing revealed they were composed primarily of oxygen and a substance resembling silicate, with trace elements that did not fit neatly into the known mineral record. Some samples also exhibited properties that suggested exposure to extreme heat not found naturally on Earth's surface. What were they? A natural oddity? Debris from ancient space activity? Or, as local accounts insisted, pieces of something larger? Among the Kono and Kissi peoples, stories tell of star beings who came to Earth long ago. Tall, pale-skinned, with hair like fire and eyes like moonlight. They descended not in wrath or glory, but in sorrow. Their world, they said, had been destroyed. The stones that fell were fragments of it, remnants of their home, now scattered across the earth. Some say they taught the first humans how to track the stars, how to shape stone, how to speak the names of plants in ways that healed rather than harmed. Is this simply folklore, or a distant echo of contact and catastrophe? The idea of celestial beings arriving with stones or fire from the sky is not unique to West Africa. In Dogon cosmology, one of the most complex and astronomical systems of pre-modern Africa, there are references to a star system invisible to the naked eye, Sirius B. The Dogon not only described its existence long before modern telescopes confirmed it, but also claimed it was the origin of the Nomo, amphibious beings who descended to Earth in an arc that burned as it fell. These stories speak of transformation, of DNA-like spirals, of star maps carved into stone. In Central Australia, the Aboriginal peoples tell of the Wandjina, sky beings who came in cloud ships and left behind knowledge, laws, and stone artworks, often eerily humanoid figures with large eyes and radiant heads. In Central America, the Aztecs believed that their ancestors came from Aztlan, a place that fell from the sky. In East Asia, myths speak of dragons descending in fiery orbs, bringing with them celestial wisdom. Could all of these stories, though filtered through different languages and symbols, trace back to a shared memory, one in which beings arrived from the heavens, not as gods, but as survivors? Some researchers have proposed that the Skystone people may not have been native to Earth at all, that they came from a destroyed world, possibly a planet in our solar system long since shattered, like the hypothesized Planet Vive, or the mysterious remains of the asteroid belt. Others suggest they were part of a failed colonization effort, a pre-flood presence that aimed to seed knowledge or life, but was wiped out by natural forces or human rebellion. If this sounds far-fetched, consider this. Across multiple continents, the oldest myths consistently describe an age when the sky fell. In India's Rigveda, the heavens are said to have collapsed. In the Hopi tradition, fire rained from above. In Sumer, the gods destroyed entire cities with weapons that darkened the skies and poisoned the land. Might these be metaphors for celestial bombardment? Or might they be literal memories of a cataclysm involving the Skystone beings? Fragments of strange materials found across the globe fuel further questions. The iron pillar of Delhi, India, remarkably resistant to rust, is made of high phosphorus iron forged in a method lost to modern metallurgy. In Greenland, ancient meteorites were harvested by the Inuguit people and shaped into tools long before iron smelting was known. In Turkey, in the ruins of Göbekli Tepe, certain carvings appear to show cosmic impact events, comets, stars, even figures falling. Were these warnings, commemorations, or part of a larger story? Skeptics remain cautious. Unusual minerals, they argue, do not make a civilization. Legends evolve, blend, and distort. The so-called skystones may be rare geological phenomena, but the persistence of the theme, beings from the sky, bringing knowledge, building structures, and then disappearing, refuses to vanish. It lingers in petroglyphs, in ancient rituals, in the way early humans looked not down at the soil, but up at the stars, searching for something they once knew. Could the Skystone people have been among the earliest post-impact survivors, or the remnants of a pre-flood civilization that fell not from Earth's own making, but from the ruin of another world? And if they did arrive here, if fragments of their world still lie buried in our soil, scattered across time, what else did they leave behind? Perhaps the stones are only part of the story. Perhaps the rest still sleeps, beneath our feet, or above our heads. Let us keep going. The stars may not be as distant as they seem. As the last traces of the Skystone people vanish into the clouds from which they may have fallen, we turn now to something older, stranger, and in many ways more unsettling. For while many pre-flood legends speak of beings who came down from the stars, others whisper of a presence that rose, not from above, but from below. Not alien, not entirely human, but something else, something ancient, something serpentine. We enter the forgotten realm of the Ophite Civilization. The name Ophite comes from the Greek ophis, meaning serpent. In later centuries, it would be applied to a Gnostic sect that revered the serpent not as tempter, but as liberator, the one who gifted knowledge, not deceit. But some believe the term carries a much older lineage, that long before the rise of Sumer or Egypt, there existed a pre-flood civilization whose identity, power, and very image were tied to the serpent. Our journey begins in the ruins of Çatalhöyük in present-day Turkey, one of the oldest known urban settlements dating back to at least 7000 BC. Among its carefully aligned mud brick homes and shrines, archaeologists have uncovered recurring serpent motifs, painted, carved, and even sculpted into the walls. Serpent heads protrude from altars, coiling shapes wind across plaster, and buried beneath the floors, generations of ancestors were laid to rest, often with tokens shaped like reptiles. Were these just symbols of fertility, or did they signify something deeper and older? Throughout the ancient world, serpent iconography is persistent, powerful, and often paradoxical. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent deity Quetzalcoatl was both creator and destroyer, bringer of law and god of wind. In India, the Nagas were semi-divine serpentine beings said to live in subterranean palaces and guard the hidden knowledge of the earth. In Africa, the Dahomey spoke of Dan, the rainbow serpent who encircled the world. In early Hebrew texts, the Nachash, often mistranslated as snake, was a luminous, intelligent being who imparted forbidden wisdom. Why this global consistency? Why do serpents appear in the oldest myths, not merely as animals, but as beings, guardians, architects, even progenitors? Some esoteric traditions suggest that the Ophite civilization may have predated all known cultures, existing in the lost window of time before the flood, a time when the earth was governed not by nation or tribe, but by a more arcane order. According to these accounts, the Ophites were a race of serpent-like or serpent-associated beings, not in the literal sense of scaled monsters, but as an advanced people whose consciousness, movements, and symbology were deeply aligned with serpentine principles: energy, flow, regeneration, and hidden power. The famed Kundalini of Indian yogic science, the coiled energy said to lie at the base of the spine, bears striking resemblance to this archetype. So too does the caduceus, the ancient symbol of medicine, twin serpents spiraling upward along a central axis. Could these symbols, still used today, be inherited fragments of an Ophite worldview? One that encoded spiritual ascent, transformation, and hidden knowledge through the language of the serpent? At the ancient site of Ubaid, not far from where the first Sumerian cities would later rise, archaeologists uncovered a series of strange figurines dating to the 6th millennium BC. These small statues depict humanoid figures with elongated skulls, slanted eyes, and, most peculiarly, reptilian features. Some cradle infants, others sit in regal poses. Their provenance is unclear, and their meaning hotly debated. Are they early fertility idols, proto-deities, or relics of an Ophite lineage? Mainstream archaeologists caution against sensationalism. Reptilian imagery, they argue, is often symbolic and can be interpreted in many cultural contexts. But even they acknowledge the peculiar consistency of these motifs, particularly when paired with oral traditions that describe ancient knowledge-bearers who were scaled, cold to the touch, or moved like wind through grass. Could the Ophite civilization have been real? A culture so ancient it now exists only in mythic form, its structures eroded, its language lost, its memory misfiled as metaphor. Some theories go further still. Fringe researchers have proposed that the Ophites were not just symbolic or metaphoric, but a hybrid species, possibly the result of early genetic experimentation, whether human-led or introduced from elsewhere. In this view, the pre-flood world may have hosted multiple intelligent lineages, some more human, some less, each rising and falling before our own version of history ever began. It is here that the legend of the Great Flood takes on a chilling new tone. Was it simply a response to human corruption, or a targeted cleansing of beings that once roamed the surface alongside us? Beings who possessed knowledge deemed dangerous, heretical, or uncontrollable. In the Gnostic texts unearthed at Nag Hammadi, the serpent is not the deceiver of Eden, but the awakener, the one who opens Adam and Eve's eyes to the nature of reality. The Archons, jealous of this knowledge, cast him down. But the Ophites preserved the tradition, remembering the serpent not as a threat, but as a teacher. Is it possible that this religious reinterpretation preserved the last philosophical remnant of an actual people, one whose legacy was forcibly rewritten? And if so, what might they have known? Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Ophite mystery is that it never fully goes away. From underground temples in Malta carved with winding serpentine corridors, to the megalithic stone rings of South Africa known as Adam's Calendar, to the whispering riddles in our oldest texts, the serpent remains, not as a warning, but as a question. Who were the Ophites? A lost civilization, a suppressed bloodline, or simply the first ones who understood that knowledge, like a serpent, must coil in secret until the time comes to rise again? Let us continue. There are still more layers to peel away, and the serpent is not done speaking. From the shadowed myths of the Ophite civilization, where serpentine wisdom may have shaped the earliest paths of knowledge, we now ascend into a tale altogether more radiant, but no less mysterious. A city not carved from stone or grown from soil, but described as glowing, rising, suspended between worlds. A city seen not only through vision, but through revelation. This is the legend of the Enochian City of Light. Our journey begins not in geography, but in scripture. Deep within the apocryphal texts of the Book of Enoch, an ancient manuscript once revered and later cast into obscurity, there is mention of a city beyond the reach of mortal men. Enoch, the seventh patriarch in the line of Adam, is taken, bodily and without death, into a realm beyond earth. There he sees a place of brightness, structured in perfection, and inhabited not by humans, but by angels. I saw a structure built of crystal stones, Enoch writes, and between those stones tongues of living fire moved. The floor sparkled like stars, and the ceiling, made not of stone, but of flashes of lightning and flowing fire. What was this vision? A symbolic description of heaven? Or could it have been a memory, encoded in scripture, of something real, something once seen in a forgotten pre-flood age? The Book of Enoch, written in Ge'ez and preserved primarily through Ethiopian tradition, predates much of modern biblical canon and has long been a source of controversy. Yet, its details are unusually specific, naming not only a heavenly city, but also the Watchers, a class of angels who descend to earth, teach forbidden knowledge, and create offspring that threaten the order of the world. Their punishment and the coming flood form the backdrop of Enoch's ascent. Some scholars argue this narrative mirrors the older Mesopotamian myths of the Annunaki, or the Greek stories of the Titans, powerful beings who break divine law and are cast down. But within the Enochian story is a more curious element: the city itself. The abode of the Holy Ones, not a metaphorical heaven, but a structured domain, with walls, gates, towers, geometry. Could this city of light have existed in some form, on Earth or near it, before the flood swept it away? Ancient astronaut theorists propose that what Enoch saw was not a spiritual revelation, but a technologically advanced city, perhaps a kind of orbital station or mountaintop sanctuary, built by an advanced civilization mistaken for angels. To them, the crystal and fire may describe not mysticism, but artificial light, energy fields, plasma, or metal unfamiliar to ancient minds. Could Enoch have been a witness, not to the afterlife, but to a pre-flood enclave of immense technological sophistication? There are ruins across the world that seem to whisper in the same language. At the summit of Mount Hermon, where tradition says the Watchers first descended, megalithic ruins rest in patterns more aligned with stars than seasons. In Bolivia, the mysterious remains of Tiahuanaco, especially the sunken temple of Calasasaya, bear architectural anomalies suggesting advanced astronomical knowledge. And in Baalbek, Lebanon, the trilithon stones, each weighing over 800 tons, lie at the heart of a temple platform whose origins remain unexplained. Were these scattered foundations part of the same pre-flood world Enoch glimpsed? In later mystical traditions, particularly among Renaissance magicians like John Dee and Edward Kelly, the term Enochian took on a new meaning, referring to a divine language supposedly revealed by angelic intelligences. It was said to be the original language of humankind, one that held not just communication, but creation, a vibrational key to shape reality. If such a language ever existed, could it have once echoed through a luminous city, where language and structure were one and the same? Could Enoch's city of light have been a kind of archive, a sanctuary of pure geometry and sacred knowledge, a place built not to endure, but to remain hidden, veiled in allegory and fire? Skeptics, of course, maintain that the Book of Enoch is apocalyptic literature, meant to inspire awe and fear, not convey literal history. But even they acknowledge its strange coherence. Unlike other visionary texts, it presents its otherworldly scenes with architectural precision: measured steps, jeweled walls, chambers of fire, pillars of light. Was Enoch a prophet or a chronicler? Some interpretations suggest that the City of Light was not destroyed, but withdrew. Like the Agarthans, like Shambhala, it moved beyond the veil, into a higher dimension or frequency, inaccessible to modern perception. Others suggest it still exists in a remote location, cloaked by design. The flood may have erased much, but not all. And for those who know where to look or listen, the echoes of Enoch's journey may still be found. The Ethiopian highlands, where the Book of Enoch survived in secret for centuries, are themselves wrapped in mystery. Churches carved into bedrock, monasteries hidden in cliffs, tales of sacred relics guarded for millennia. Could some memory of the city, have endured here, encoded in liturgy, song, or symbol? We do not know. But Enoch's vision has endured for over 2,000 years. It crosses religious boundaries, echoes in mystical circles, and resurfaces wherever seekers chase the edges of memory. Was the Enochian city of light merely a dream? Or a real place, briefly seen, swiftly lost, and now flickering on the threshold between myth and memory? Let us continue. Some cities may fall, but others simply slip from view. From the glowing temples of the Enochian realm, where light was language and knowledge was flame, we descend now into something darker, less ethereal, more primal. A lineage that coils through the roots of myth, winding silently beneath the surface of ancient belief systems. We enter the domain of the sons of the Serpent. Somewhere deep in the Sudanese desert, long before the pyramids, long before recorded history, a series of carved stones lies half buried in the sand. They depict figures with elongated limbs, staring eyes, and most curiously, serpent headdresses. Not stylized symbols, but sculpted faces with subtle scales, forked tongues, and serpentine crowns. Who were these beings? Priests? Kings? Or something else? These images are not isolated. Across cultures, from Mesoamerica to Mesopotamia, serpent worship appears not as an anomaly, but a pattern. The plumed serpent of the Maya, the Nagas of India, the uraeus cobra that adorned the brows of Egyptian pharaohs, the rainbow serpent of Aboriginal lore. Even the Bible begins with a serpent, not just as tempter, but as the first to speak. But the sons of the serpent are more than iconography. In esoteric traditions, they are spoken of as a pre-flood priesthood, a lineage, perhaps not entirely human, that claimed to carry forbidden knowledge, astronomy, healing, metallurgy, even genetic manipulation. It is said they ruled not through war or wealth, but through wisdom and fear. Could these be the same beings whispered of in the Book of Enoch? The Watchers who descended to earth and taught humanity the secrets of heaven? Or do they belong to an even older order? In some traditions, the sons of the serpent were thought to be descended from an ancient figure named Satael, or in other texts, Samyaza, one of the fallen Watchers. Their symbol was not merely a snake, but the double serpent, a twisting duality of creation and destruction, echoing the DNA helix long before science uncovered it. What's particularly strange is how often these symbols predate the civilizations we associate them with. In the ancient city of Eridu, regarded by Sumerians as the first city, the temple of Enki, god of water and wisdom, contains some of the earliest serpent motifs in human history. Yet the layers beneath that temple suggest an even older structure, swallowed by mud and time. Were the sons of the serpent builders of these lost foundations? Mainstream archaeology is cautious. Serpents, they argue, are universal animals, present in every environment, often feared, often revered. Their presence in mythology, then, is a product of psychological archetype, not literal lineage. But this explanation, while reasonable, cannot account for the depth of reverence or the consistency of the serpent's role as bringer of knowledge. In Egypt, the goddess Wadjet, depicted as a cobra, was the protector of Lower Egypt and the divine eye of Ra. Her image was placed on crowns, temples, and tombs. In Gnostic texts, the serpent is not evil, but the emancipator, the one who opens the eyes of Adam and Eve. In Hindu texts, Kundalini, the coiled serpent at the base of the spine, is the source of divine awakening. Why does the serpent so often represent knowledge, and not just knowledge, but dangerous knowledge? In the Americas, the priesthoods of Quetzalcoatl were rumored to perform strange rites, rituals of transformation, some said, in which men became gods. In some Native American oral traditions, snake people are described as tall, luminous, and cold to the touch, beings who lived underground, emerging only to guide or warn. Were these stories pure invention, or echoes of something lost? Some fringe theorists have gone further, proposing that the sons of the Serpent were not a metaphorical priesthood, but a distinct race or species, possibly interbreeding with early humans. They point to anomalies: elongated skulls found from Paracas to Anatolia, traces of advanced metallurgy in pre-Bronze Age strata, and genetic markers that defy current classification. Even Plato, in his dialogues, references divine men who once guided humanity before the flood and who were later demonized or forgotten. But perhaps the most haunting trace of the sons lies not in temples or texts, but in silence. Many ancient traditions speak of a deliberate erasure, a time when certain symbols, certain names, were outlawed, destroyed, or buried. In Egypt, Akhenaten's sudden worship of a singular, serpent sun god was swiftly erased after his death. In Israel, the bronze serpent Nehushtan was destroyed by King Hezekiah for being too powerful, too revered. In the Maya world, the scribes who recorded the plumed serpent's return were wiped out in the fires of conquest. Why such fear? What secret were the sons believed to protect? Some say it was the memory of what came before the flood, the age of watchers, of half-blood kings, of a wisdom humanity was never meant to hold. Others believe the sons still exist, not in physical form, but in symbol, in ritual, in quiet orders that trace their roots back to forgotten ages. Their legacy is hidden in plain sight, the medical symbol of the caduceus, with its twin serpents entwined, the staff of Moses that turned into a snake, the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail, symbol of eternity and hidden cycles, the double helix spiral in every strand of DNA. Were these symbols chosen or inherited? As we trace the curling path of the serpent through ancient myth and ruin, we are left with more questions than answers. Were the sons of the serpent real? If so, who were they? Messengers, masters, or merely mirrors, reflecting our own hunger for knowledge and our fear of what it costs? The serpent sleeps, but it is never far from the roots of our history. And as we move deeper into the shadows of pre-flood time, one has to ask, what else lies coiled beneath the surface? Waiting. As the legends of the serpent lineages recede into the shadowed soil of forgotten time, we lift our gaze toward the stars, toward a small cluster of blue-white lights that have inspired awe across every continent for thousands of years. The ancients called them many names: the Seven Sisters, the Net, the Doves. But to the mystery traditions, they are known simply as the Pleiades. Nestled in the constellation Taurus, the Pleiades star cluster is just 444 light-years from Earth, close by cosmic standards, yet infinitely far in historical memory. For millennia, cultures across the globe have pointed skyward and spoken of these stars not merely as distant suns, but as home, as origin, as something sacred. Why? On the surface, the Pleiades appear as no more than a scattering of stars. But as we move through the world's most ancient myths and symbols, a pattern begins to emerge, subtle, consistent, and strangely global. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs believed the world would end if the Pleiades failed to rise. Their calendar aligned with its motion. In Japan, they are called Subaru and symbolized as a family of celestial beings. In the traditions of the Maori, the Pleiades marked the start of the new year and were believed to house ancestors who watch from above. The Dogon of Mali, renowned for their inexplicably accurate knowledge of Sirius and its invisible companion stars, claim that their wisdom came from beings who descended from the Pleiades long before recorded history began. In North America, the Lakota, Cherokee, and Hopi all speak of star people, beings of light who came from the Seven Sisters. Some traditions say they taught early humans the rhythms of agriculture, the cycles of the earth. Others hint at a more complex relationship, visitors who interbred, who guided, and who sometimes withdrew. Why do these unconnected cultures share the same source point? Mainstream astronomy acknowledges the prominence of the Pleiades in the night sky and its significance in agriculture-based calendars. The cluster rises just before dawn during planting seasons, making it a reliable timekeeper for early societies. But this practical role doesn't explain the spiritual reverence or the tales of visitors, guardians, and teachers descending from this star system. In the high plateaus of the Andes, there are petroglyphs that appear to show 7 dots arranged in the exact pattern of the Pleiades, alongside humanoid figures with large eyes, strange helmets, and elongated limbs. The Inca believed their ancestors came from the stars, and in some stories, the Pleiades were seen as a gateway between worlds. The Quechua even timed important ceremonies to the heliacal rising of the cluster, marking what they called the time of the return. In ancient Egypt, the 7 Hathors, mysterious female deities, were associated with fate, music, and the underworld. Often shown together as a group, some scholars argue they are a symbolic reflection of the Pleiades themselves, the celestial sisters who guide the soul through its cosmic journey. Were these symbols of the human psyche, or memories of something else? According to fringe historians and esoteric traditions, the Pleiadian colonies were not metaphorical. They were physical and terrestrial. These civilizations, it is said, were seated in the deep pre-flood world, during an age when Earth was more energetically open, when celestial migration was not only possible, but purposeful. Some of these traditions suggest the colonies were built not just to observe humanity, but to uplift it, to teach, to intervene. The legends describe crystalline cities hidden in the lush highlands of what is now South America, and others buried beneath the sands of northern Africa. They speak of floating monoliths, light-based technologies, and a people of radiant appearance, often depicted with soft, pale features and an almost tranquil presence. Beings not of conquest, but of balance, of intention. And yet, if they existed, where did they go? Some say they vanished during the Great Flood, pulled back to their star system after the Watchers fell and the Earth's vibration shifted. Others believe they withdrew into inner Earth sanctuaries, possibly aligning with legends of Agartha, Shambhala, or even the mythic Hyperborea. Mainstream science is, understandably, skeptical. There is no direct evidence of off-world colonization and no historical texts that clearly link the Pleiades to ancient visitors. But even skeptics are intrigued by the astronomical sophistication of early civilizations, how they mapped not only planets, but stars invisible to the naked eye, how they built structures that aligned not just with the sun or moon, but with constellations like the Pleiades across thousands of years. Could this awareness have been inherited from a lost lineage? The question deepens when we examine the work of visionaries like Helena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, and Barbara Marciniak, who, separated by centuries, all claim to receive knowledge from Pleiadian intelligences. While their messages vary, they echo one another in strange ways, a call to remember an ancient past, to reawaken a forgotten relationship with the stars. Was this merely spiritual metaphor, or fragmented memory? In today's world, Pleiadian encounters are still reported, not in temples, but in dreams, visions, and so-called contact experiences. Often peaceful, sometimes overwhelming, these stories describe the same characteristics: light, harmony, advanced intelligence, and a sense of urgent return. Are these the echoes of pre-flood colonies, of a bond once broken, but not severed? We don't know, but the stars remain. The Pleiades still rise over sacred sites, still flicker in the minds of seekers and shamans. still invite us to look up and wonder not what is, but what was. And as we stand at the edge of ancient memory and cosmic possibility, one question whispers like wind across forgotten stone. What if Earth was never alone? As the light of the Pleiades fades into the southern sky, we descend, both in geography and in time, to the rugged highlands of southern Africa. Here, on a remote ridge near the border of South Africa and Zimbabwe, lies a circle of standing stones, weathered by wind and silence. Few passers-by would give it a second glance, and yet, it may be one of the oldest megalithic structures on Earth. Locals call it Inzalo Yilanga, the birthplace of the sun. But to researchers and alternative historians, it bears another name, charged with symbolic gravity: Adam's calendar. At first glance, Adam's calendar resembles a simple stone circle. Rough dolerite monoliths jut from the scrub-covered hilltop, positioned with what appears to be intentional symmetry. But as archaeologists and independent investigators began surveying its layout, something unusual emerged. The stones are aligned with the cardinal directions. Two taller monoliths mark the rise and fall of the sun on the solstices. Some claim the shadows cast by these stones form a rudimentary solar calendar, one that could track not just days, but entire seasons. But what makes Adam's calendar so unsettling, so provocative, is not just its function, but its age. Conservative estimates, drawn from erosion patterns and soil accumulation, suggest the structure could be 25,000 years old. Others push the date back even further, beyond 75,000 years. If true, it would predate the Egyptian pyramids, Stonehenge, and even Göbekli Tepe. Far from being a footnote of local heritage, this circle of stones may represent a lost chapter of human, or pre-human, history. Who were the people capable of building such a structure at such an impossibly early time? Mainstream archaeology remains cautious. Many scholars believe the site to be a cattle enclosure or ceremonial circle from the Iron Age. There are no inscriptions, no tools, no bones to suggest an advanced civilization. Yet others argue that the absence of typical archaeological debris is precisely what makes it curious. The stones, some weighing several tons, appear to have been transported from kilometers away, without the wheel, without animals, without any evidence of roads or quarries. Michael Tellinger, a South African researcher and proponent of ancient civilization theories, suggests that Adam's calendar may have been the central node in a massive network of stone ruins scattered across southern Africa. Aerial photography reveals thousands of circular structures covering vast stretches of land, connected by what appear to be ancient roads or energy channels. Some believe these formations extend over 500,000 square kilometers. Are these merely remnants of early tribal settlements, or fragments of a forgotten empire? According to Zulu oral tradition, the region was once ruled by a race of sky beings known as the Abantu Abakulu, the Great People. They were described as tall, light-skinned, and capable of feats beyond human understanding. They came from the stars, brought knowledge of gold, astronomy, and sound, and eventually vanished after a great catastrophe. Could the builders of Adam's calendar have been part of this mythical lineage? Some researchers have noted an unsettling detail. The stone at the center of the circle is not just aligned with the sun, it is magnetically anomalous. Compasses behave erratically near it. Others have found high levels of piezoelectric quartz in the stones themselves, hinting at a possible energetic function. Was this calendar simply a solar tracker? Or something more, an astronomical observatory, a healing center, or a device tuned to natural energy grids long lost to modern science? There are also tantalizing symbolic parallels. In many ancient myths, the first man, whether Adam, Adamu, or Atum, is created in the land of the south, near rivers and mountains. In Sumerian lore, The god Enki's domain of Abzu, the watery deep, is located far from Mesopotamia, possibly in Africa. Some have even connected the site to Zecharia Sitchin's theories about the Anunnaki and their obsession with gold mining in this region. These stories, though widely dismissed by academics, share a curious consistency. The idea that humanity, or something resembling it, was shaped by outside forces, and that those forces left traces behind. Adam's calendar, in that sense, becomes more than just a pile of stones. It becomes a marker, a boundary between the known and the unknowable. Could this lonely hilltop ruin be the last surviving monument of an ancient world? A world where knowledge of the heavens was etched into stone long before agriculture, metallurgy, or writing. And if such a world once existed, what brought it to an end? Flood legends abound in African oral traditions, just as they do in every corner of the globe. Some speak of great rains that swallowed entire cities. Others speak of fire from the skies, or a time when the stars fell to earth. Could Adam's calendar have survived such an event? And what stories would its builders have passed on? Had they survived? We may never know. The stones remain silent. The wind tells no secrets. And yet, as we trace the alignments, as we study the patterns in the land, as we listen to the stories still whispered by tribal elders, one cannot help but wonder, was this hilltop once a sacred site? A celestial clock? A place where the heavens met the earth? Or was it something else entirely, something far older and far more terrifying than we are ready to remember? As we leave the sun-worn stones of Adam's calendar behind, the trail leads us not toward monuments of stone, but toward whispers in the genealogies of ancient texts, hidden not in landscapes, but in names, passed down, redacted, or lost. Among these shadows, one name recurs with a strange consistency: Seraiah, a name woven through biblical scrolls, priestly records, and oral traditions, always just at the edge of the narrative, and perhaps pointing to something much older than it appears. Who were the Seraiah Tribes? To most scholars, Seraiah is merely a name, Hebrew in origin, meaning Yahweh has prevailed. In the Bible, several men are listed with this name: a high priest, a scribe, a prince of Judah. But some researchers argue that these appearances are echoes, fragments of something deeper, something predating written scripture, a name that may once have referred not to a person, but to a people who vanished long before the ink dried on any scroll. We begin in the highlands of northern Mesopotamia, near the ancient crossroads of Assyria and Anatolia. In these rugged hills and eroded valleys, strange petroglyphs dot the cliffs, symbols that do not match Sumerian cuneiform or Akkadian carvings, swirling patterns, horned figures, stylized suns and crescents, and at the center of many of them, an abstracted glyph, often interpreted as a tree or a branching river, but in some circles believed to represent a lineage, the lineage of Seraiah. According to speculative traditions, the Seraiah tribes were a priestly caste, not necessarily in the religious sense we understand today, but as custodians of knowledge, of language, of astronomical cycles, and possibly of something even more guarded: memory. Oral legends among Assyrian Christians speak of an ancient group of watchers, record keepers who kept the song of the world in a tongue older than Aramaic. Some versions suggest these people could interpret celestial signs, that they preserved a knowledge given before the flood, a knowledge not meant for war or dominion, but for balance, for timing. Was Seraiah a priest, or the title of one who understood when to act, when to speak, when to hide? Mainstream history offers no clear consensus, but the strange thing is that Seraiah's name appears at curious moments: at the fall of the First Temple, at the exile to Babylon, again in the lineage of Ezra. It is as though the name returns, always tied to collapse and to transmission, the passing of something from one world to another. Could this pattern point to something older? Could Seraiah have been a tribe that existed before the floodwaters came, long before history, as we know it, began? Alternative researchers note that some apocryphal writings, especially those filtered through Enochian and Essene lenses, mention tribes of the East who preserved the pure breath of the pre-Adamic tongue. These tribes were said to live apart, in valleys shielded by high mountains. They were not kings, they were not warriors, but scribes, witnesses, and sometimes midwives of destiny. A 12th century text found in Aleppo speaks of a clan of scribes with no city, who moved in accordance with the stars, carrying with them a relic known only as the Breath Tablet. The passage is vague, perhaps poetic, but intriguing. What is a breath tablet? A metaphor for oral tradition? A lost technology? Or an encoded reference to something more literal? Those who follow fringe lines of inquiry suggest that the Seraiah tribes may have been descendants, or perhaps remnants, of a civilization destroyed not just by water, but by erasure, by deliberate silence. Their task, some claim, was to seed fragments of forgotten knowledge across cultures, a word here, a symbol there, to leave traces, not monuments, to write on people, not stone. If true, it would explain their invisibility. It would also suggest that the Seraiah tribes were not terrifying in the conventional sense. There are no myths of war machines, no tales of conquest or divine retribution. Their power, if any, lay in what they remembered, and in what they refused to reveal. And perhaps that is what makes them so unsettling. Because in a world of collapsing towers and roaring floods, of gods warring in the sky and cities drowning beneath mud and ash, the idea of a silent observer, a tribe that does not intervene, only records, feels alien, inhuman even. Who writes the story of the flood? Who chooses what survives? Could the Seraiah tribes have been early custodians of what we now call sacred history? Or were they guarding something else entirely, something buried so deep in time that only symbols and names remain? In southern Turkey, near the ruins of ancient Harran, local legends speak of a hidden people who emerged only during eclipses, offering warnings or guidance. They came robed, never spoke directly, and vanished before the moon returned to light. Among them was always one who carried the mark of the tree and flame, ink and fire, memory and judgment. We do not know what became of the Seraiah tribes, if they existed at all. But the name lingers, not loud, not often, just enough to feel intentional. And so we are left with silence, a silence that watches, records, and refuses to explain itself. So who were they? Custodians of ancient codes? Witnesses to the first catastrophe? Or simply a name, repeated across time, growing stranger with each passing age? Like a ghostly watermark on the canvas of human history, the Seraiah tribes invite us to look again, not at what is written, but at what was meant to be forgotten. What if memory itself was their monument? And what if, hidden between stone circles, submerged calendars, and forgotten genealogies, they are still here, watching, waiting, as the last echoes of the Seraiah tribes fade into the silence of forgotten mountains and half-erased scrolls, our attention shifts, not to a name, but to a pattern, a shape, carved into stone, echoed in sacred geometry, and whispered across civilizations that never knew each other, yet somehow drew the same symbol, the circle, but not just any circle. In ancient alchemical texts, in forbidden grimoires tucked into the corners of Renaissance Europe, and even in obscure Egyptian papyri, there is reference to a symbol known as the Emerald Circle. a closed loop, vibrant and unbroken, often drawn in green ink. Its presence is never explained, only implied. It appears beside diagrams of transmutation, beside descriptions of divine architecture, and sometimes beside maps that do not match our world. Where did this symbol come from, and what does it mean? Some believe the Emerald Circle refers not to a geometric concept, but to a people, a hidden group, perhaps a pre-flood civilization, defined not by their empire, but by their role. A circle of keepers, of builders, of watchers. Our search begins in the heart of the Sahara Desert, where something unexpected lies beneath the sand. Near the Mauritanian coast, satellite imagery reveals a massive geological formation, the Rishat structure, often called the Eye of the Sahara. Concentric rings stretching for miles, barely visible to the human eye on the ground, but unmistakable from above. Geologists claim it's a natural dome, formed by erosion over hundreds of millions of years, but others have noticed strange symmetries in its layout, alignments, ratios. To some, it resembles a blueprint, and curiously, it mirrors a description, one found in ancient Greek accounts of Atlantis, a city formed by alternating rings of land and water, protected, ordered, sacred. Is it coincidence? Perhaps, but such formations, ringed and massive, seem to repeat across the globe, in the Bolivian highlands, in the Australian outback, under the forests of southern India. Faint outlines, perfect circles, too large to be forts, too symmetrical to be tribal camps, and always old, too old. What civilization could have created these forms, and why would they do so? In the texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a semi-mythical figure from the Hermetic tradition, there is a passage that speaks of the green light of knowledge encircled in the breath of the gods. Many believe this is a metaphor, a reference to the philosopher's stone or divine wisdom. But what if it isn't? What if the Emerald Circle was a literal thing? Fragments of emerald have been discovered in unusual archaeological contexts, embedded in Neolithic tools, fused within collapsed structures in Central Asia, and even buried deep in the subglacial ice cores of Greenland, where no emerald should exist. These shards, sometimes cut, sometimes raw, show signs of exposure to extreme pressure and heat. But what's more puzzling is the carvings, symbols, spirals, some of which resemble characters found in undeciphered scripts like Linear A, or the Vinci symbols. Coincidence? Pattern? There's an idea among fringe historians that the Emerald Circle was not a location or object, but a network. A pre-flood confederation of knowledge keepers who encoded their understanding not in books, but in stone and symbol. Their work was subtle, not monuments, but alignments, not statues, but harmonics. They built with energy in mind, with resonance, with memory. And what did they fear? That question looms over every whisper of the Emerald Circle, because wherever these supposed sites are found, they carry traces of abrupt endings, heat damage, ash layers, tsunami silt where no sea should have reached, signs of sudden silence. It is as if these circles weren't just meant to store knowledge, but to protect it, to shield it from something we have forgotten. Even the name emerald carries weight. In Islamic tradition, paradise is said to be paved with emerald. In medieval alchemy, it was the color of rebirth, and in Mesoamerican cultures, green stones were believed to house the breath of the gods. Why do cultures so separated by time and ocean all revere the same stone? Why the same geometry? In the Sumerian city of Eridu, considered by many the first city in history, tablets speak of a council of 9 who came cloaked in emerald light. They were not kings, they did not rule, they advised, they disappeared. Who were they? Skeptics will point to myth-making. to the human tendency to overlay pattern on chaos. Circles are simple. Emerald is rare and beautiful. And yet, why do these elements keep emerging where history runs thin? In Peru, a recently unearthed chamber beneath a ruined temple revealed a mural, faded but intact, of a circle surrounded by concentric serpents, all painted in green. Its placement was deliberate, at the lowest level of the site, beneath centuries of construction, hidden beneath layers of older walls. Not a symbol for the public, but for someone who already knew. Could the Emerald Circle have been real? A code passed through ages? A brotherhood of memory that survived the first fall of man? We may never know, because every time we come close to decoding their presence, the trail turns inward, into myths, into numbers, into dreams. The Emerald Circle does not declare itself. It suggests, it refracts, and perhaps that is its purpose. Because the most dangerous truth is the one wrapped in beauty, the one you overlook because it feels familiar, safe. But what if it was never meant to be found, only remembered? And what if it waits, not in ruins or texts, but in the echo of a shape, a circle, closed, complete, enduring? As the echoes of the Emerald Circle fade into geometry and green light, we shift now toward the east, into a land where myth and memory are often indistinguishable. A land where rivers coil like serpents through plains heavy with monsoon breath, and where the ancient stones still seem to hum with a language we no longer speak. Northern India. But not the India we know, not the Vedic hymns, nor the epics written in remembered time. Before that, long before that, there may have been something else. Hidden beneath layers of cultural sediment, obscured by the weight of scripture and the erosion of memory, lies the story, half silenced, of what some have called the Rama Empire. Not just a kingdom, but a civilization, advanced, vast, possibly global. The name comes to us most vividly from ancient Hindu epics like the Ramayana, where Rama is depicted as a prince, a warrior, a divine being. But was he also a memory of a forgotten age, a symbol of a people, of a dynasty erased by time and flood? Throughout the Indian subcontinent, ruins emerge in the unlikeliest places. Megalithic stone temples in southern India, whose foundations seem older than their inscriptions. Remnants of cities, like the submerged ruins off the coast of Dwarka, that baffle archaeologists with their depth and precision. Artifacts pulled from the riverbeds of the Sarasvati, a river that no longer flows but once fed an entire ecosystem of cities, now lost to sand. Mainstream scholars speak of the Indus Valley Civilization, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, a Bronze Age marvel advanced in urban planning, sanitation, trade. But what lies beneath those ruins? In some locations, ground-penetrating radar has revealed even deeper structures, older, unaligned with the Indus grid system, built of heavier stone, oriented not to rivers, but to stars. What people lived before even the Harappans? What language did they speak? And why does no record of them remain, except perhaps in legend? The Ramayana and Mahabharata, though written down centuries later, describe technology and warfare of staggering scale. Flying machines called vimanas, weapons of fire and light, cities in the sky, and terrible wars that scarred the earth. The descriptions are poetic, yes, but they are also specific, detailing propulsion systems, aerial battles, and even the after-effects of what some have interpreted as nuclear devastation. At Mohenjo-Daro, a mysterious layer of fused green glass was discovered, resembling vitrified soil. Such phenomena are rare in nature, but they appear in only a few places on Earth, including modern nuclear test sites. Could it be coincidence? Could it be a trick of volcanic pressure? Or is it evidence of something more disturbing? Some researchers point to the descriptions in the Mahabharata of a weapon, like a blazing column of smoke and fire as bright as 1,000 suns, which blinded warriors and caused birds to fall from the sky. To others, this sounds eerily like a nuclear explosion. Yet these words were written, or at least preserved, thousands of years before such weapons were even conceivable. Is it possible the Rama Empire, if it existed, mastered forms of energy we no longer understand? Or is this simply myth, misunderstood through a modern lens? And if it is myth, why do similar stories appear in so many other cultures? In ancient Mesopotamian texts, in Central American codices, in Norse epics, we hear of shining cities, devastating wars among gods, weapons too powerful for man. Could they all be fragments of the same memory? Could the Rama Empire be one piece of a global puzzle, a civilization that rose before 10,000 BC, before the Ice Age ended, before the flood that so many traditions speak of as a reset? There is also the question of the Nagas, serpent beings said to live underground or beneath the rivers, often associated with the ancient kings of India. In some versions, the Nagas ruled before humans or alongside them. And they were architects, engineers, builders of great cities in the time before time. Were they metaphor, an allegory for another species, or a memory of something we have chosen not to remember? The ancient Indian city of Vijayanagara, though built in more recent times, stands atop layers of older ruins. Its architects once spoke of building upon the bones of Rama's empire, but those bones have never been conclusively dated. They belong to an architecture that seems out of place: massive stone beams, interlocking foundations, and mathematical proportions found also in Angkor Wat, and even, strangely, in the temples of Teotihuacan. What was this knowledge that seemed to transcend continents? Who were the keepers of this geometry? Even now, the Indian government restricts access to certain archaeological sites, especially those submerged along the Gulf of Kambat, where sonar scans have revealed grids of stone structures lost beneath the sea. Skeptics cite natural formations, but the sonar maps show rectilinear designs, roads, and what could be stepped wells or ziggurats. According to some interpretations, these cities date back over 9,000 years. If confirmed, they would rewrite history entirely. But confirmation remains elusive. Perhaps the truth of the Rama Empire lies not in stone, but in rhythm, in mantras that echo codes, in stories that disguise records, in rituals that may have once encoded science. If the ancients hid their knowledge from time, perhaps they did so not by burying it, but by making it sacred, protected not by secrecy, but by reverence. Could the Rama Empire have been one of Earth's first great experiments in civilization, a beacon of art, energy, and order in a time before history dared to remember? Or is it simply a mirror, showing us not what was, but what we wish had been? In the silence of India's deepest temples, in the hum of rituals passed down across millennia, the memory of Rama persists. And so we ask, what remains of the world that came before the Vedas? And why did it vanish? And while the echoes of the Rama Empire still reverberate through the ancient soil of India, through ruins half buried and scriptures half understood, we turn now to whispers far older and far more elusive, to the Pacific, to a chain of legends scattered across the islands of Oceania, to symbols etched into the volcanic cliffs of Micronesia, and to a name that drifts like a shadow across the threshold of forbidden memory: the Nacaal Brotherhood. We do not know where their temples stood. We do not know what language they spoke, and yet, traces remain. According to esoteric texts and fringe records that most academic circles avoid, the Nacaal were the keepers of knowledge too vast for the world that followed. They were said to be the priests and scientists of the ancient continent of Mu, a landmass that, if it existed, once stretched across the Pacific Ocean, connecting Asia to the Americas through a now-lost civilization of terrifying intelligence and spiritual power. It is not a name that arises from folklore alone. The concept of Mu first entered Western consciousness through the work of Augustus Le Plongeon and later James Churchward, a British colonel turned occult historian, who claimed to have translated ancient tablets from India and Tibet. These tablets, he said, described a vanished priesthood, the Nacaal, guardians of the sacred, builders of cities lost to the ocean, survivors of cataclysm. Skeptics dismiss Churchward's claims as fantasy. No geological evidence for Mu, they say. No continental shelf beneath the Pacific to support such a landmass. And yet, oral histories from Polynesia to South America tell of a motherland that sank beneath the waves. The Hopi speak of Kaskara, the Hawaiians speak of Kanehunamoku, the Maori of Hawaii. And in each version, there are people, wise, luminous, who possessed knowledge of stars, of energy, of consciousness itself. Were these the Nacaal? Some researchers point to Nan Madol, the enigmatic stone city off the coast of Pohnpei, as a surviving outpost. Built atop coral reefs with massive basalt columns transported from distant shores, Nan Madol defies easy explanation. There are no cranes, no wheels, no iron tools, and yet, over 250 million tons of stone were placed with near-perfect symmetry, forming a maze of canals and sanctuaries said to once house high priests. Could Nan Madol have been a ceremonial site for the Nacaal, a fragment of a much vaster structure long since claimed by the sea? Further south, in the Marquesas Islands, researchers have discovered petroglyphs that seem to echo symbols found in both ancient Indus Valley tablets and pre-Columbian ruins in Peru. Could these shared motifs suggest a cultural transmission across oceans? Or do they point to something more unified, a lost matrix of civilization whose memory survives only in sacred geometry and encoded myth? According to the claims of Churchward, the Nacaal Brotherhood operated as a spiritual caste, preservers of advanced knowledge inherited from even earlier times. Their teachings were not written in alphabets, but in ideograms, geometric forms, light-based encoding. He claimed that their symbols referenced cosmic cycles, planetary alignments, and energy grids that spanned the globe, what modern fringe thinkers now call ley lines. Was this mere metaphor? Or did the Nacaal possess a way of interacting with Earth's magnetic fields? Did they use natural forces we no longer understand? And what of the catastrophe? Every story of Mu ends in water, a sudden cataclysm. Some describe an earthquake so powerful it fractured the sea floor. Others speak of a sky of fire that rained down for days, followed by a dark tide that swallowed entire cities. Is this myth or memory? The idea of a lost Pacific civilization predating the last ice age is, for most scholars, an unacceptable hypothesis. Yet, recent underwater discoveries, such as the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan, challenge the idea that advanced stone construction only emerged in the Neolithic period. Yonaguni shows carved steps, platforms, and symmetrical walls, now submerged beneath the sea. Natural formation, or a ruin too old to date? And if it is a ruin, who built it? Some researchers propose that the Nacaal were not a civilization in the traditional sense, but a network, an initiatic order whose members traveled from Mu to other lands before the flood. A spiritual diaspora. Their teachings, it's said, formed the basis of the Egyptian mystery schools, the Mayan cosmology, even the Tibetan Bon tradition. Not through conquest, but through quiet transmission. Are there still echoes of the Nacaal Brotherhood hidden in temples across the world? In the Serpent Mounds of Ohio? In the megalithic observatories of Bolivia? in the star-aligned shrines of Easter Island. Could these have been outposts, messages, markers left for a future they knew would forget? And why the secrecy? According to the most fringe interpretations, the Nacaal believed that sacred knowledge, misused, could destroy worlds. They encoded their wisdom in myth, in architecture, in sound and vibration, not to hide it from the unworthy, but to preserve it until humanity was ready. If so, what was the price of their silence? The flood myths that follow, across nearly every ancient tradition, suggest the world was not ready, that something went wrong, that a line was crossed, and the knowledge, like the Brotherhood itself, was buried beneath time and tide. We are left with fragments, symbols without keys, temples with no builders, and a name that persists only in the margins of memory, Nacaal, like a whisper from the deep Pacific. So we ask, was there ever a Brotherhood of Light? Did they walk this earth before history began? And if so, what did they leave behind that we still haven't found? And while the whispers of the Nacaal drift silently through the waters of the Pacific, we turn now to the land, to the vast, silent steppes of Eurasia, where stone echoes against sky, and bones sometimes speak when the earth is disturbed. Stretching from the Ural Mountains to the high plateaus of Central Asia, a shadow lingers in the soil, in forgotten burial mounds and in the myths of ancient tribes. It is the shadow of giants, a civilization not merely metaphorical, but physical. Towering. Real? In dozens of cultures across the Eurasian expanse, Slavic, Scythian, Iranian, Turkic, Mongolic, there are stories of ancient beings who were not like us, beings of immense stature, strength, and wisdom. They ruled, it's said, in an age before the flood, before the memory of man could hold them. Some were called the Urka, others the Almas. In old Russian chronicles, they were known as the Vityazi, a word later associated with warriors, but whose earliest meanings suggest something more colossal. Could these giants have truly existed? Archaeological records are silent, officially, and yet there are curious anomalies, unusually large bones found in old burial mounds and quietly removed, enormous weapons and tools too big for ordinary human use, megalithic doorways in remote mountains, carved precisely for figures at least 9 to 12 feet tall. In the Caucasus, shepherds still speak in hushed tones about the Katsky giants, who once moved among the crags and left behind massive footprints fossilized in stone. In Siberia, near the Yenisei River, petroglyphs depict elongated humanoid forms, arms outstretched toward the sky, each several times taller than the smaller human-like figures etched beside them. Myth, symbolism, or memory? Mainstream archaeologists dismiss these stories as cultural metaphors, representations of strength, ancestral pride, or gods. But there are researchers who take a slower, more contemplative approach. They point to the astonishing consistency of giant legends across vast, unconnected regions. In Bashkir folklore, giants are described as having built underground cities to escape a great fire from the sky. In the Altai, the legends speak of ancient beings who could shape stone with sound and vanished after the second ice. And then there are the megaliths. Scattered across the Eurasian heartland, vast stone structures dot the highlands and plateaus. Some are tombs, others observatories, some no one knows. In Kazakhstan's Turgay region, massive stone rings and geometric patterns, only visible from the sky, stretch across the desert. Who built them? And why would they be designed for aerial viewing in an age before flight? Were these remnants of the giants' kingdoms? One particularly compelling site lies in the Seraiah Mountains of southern Siberia. A wall of granite megaliths stacked with machine-like precision, some weighing an estimated 3,000 tons each. Unlike other ancient constructions, this site has no inscriptions, no accompanying artifacts, no signs of typical human activity. Just silent, unmoving stone, as if abandoned in haste or built for purposes long since forgotten. Mainstream scientists suggest these could be natural formations, the result of erosion and tectonic pressure. But others ask, why do so many of these formations appear to follow symmetrical patterns? Why do some show flat faces and right angles that seem to defy nature? In the Russian Far East, local legends speak of the old kings of stone who taught early humans how to till the soil and mark the stars. Their skin, they say, was pale as ice, their eyes silver, and they walked the earth long before the mountains rose. Could these be distorted echoes of a pre-flood civilization, one built by beings whose scale and understanding surpassed our own? Even in Western Eurasia, hints of the same narrative emerge. In Anatolia, the myth of the Ulu Büyükçekler, or Great Elders, tells of a time when the earth trembled beneath the footsteps of its rulers. In parts of ancient Sumer and Babylon, the earliest gods were often depicted as both divine and gigantic. The Annunaki, for instance, are sometimes described as beings who descended from the heavens and stood apart from mortal humans, not just spiritually, but physically. Is it possible, then, that these tales are not isolated cultural flourishes, but fractured memories of an epoch that predates our own? Could there have been kingdoms, spanning the snowfields of northern Russia to the deserts of Turkmenistan, ruled by beings far taller, stronger, and perhaps even more intelligent than we dare to imagine? If so, what happened to them? Was it the flood, the shifting of Earth's crust, or a decision to disappear, to withdraw into the mountains, the earth, the myth? And perhaps most haunting of all, what if they didn't all leave? There are still whispers in the Pamir Mountains of travelers who vanish after reporting strange figures watching from ridgelines. In the shadowed forests of the Ural, some believe the giants never died, but merely sleep, and beneath ancient kurgans, yet unopened, what bones might still lie undisturbed? We do not claim certainty, we only trace patterns, from carved stone to whispered tale, from unearthed relic to vanished lineages. And as the wind brushes across the desolate plains of Eurasia, stirring the grass that grows over forgotten mounds, we are left with a question more ancient than history. Were there truly kingdoms of giants that once ruled this land? And if so, why do we remember them only in fragments,